So thank you everyone. I'm sorry we're starting a bit late, but we will try to catch up. Let me just announce the flow of our afternoon's events. So the first part of the memory project will be a presentation and a short discussion by 3 of the current 13 artist awardees, namely Cian Dayrit, Carlo Gabuco, Archie Oclos, and Eisa Jocson, in that order. So they'll have some presentations here in front, and then we can do a by 3:30 we will have sort of a Q&A, and then by 3:45 we will have a break. But we will also play this by ear. But more or less by 3:45 we'll have a quick break until 4 o'clock. We'll have some snacks outside. Just would like to remind everyone not to bring any food or drinks inside the gallery. By 4 o'clock, we will have the second part of the memory project, where we are lucky to have some of our more senior 13 artist awardees, like Mr. Danilo Dalena, Ms. Brenda Fajardo, and Mr. Jaime De Guzman. This section we will be until 5 p.m. and at 5:30 we will have all of the former 13 artists together for an open discussion with the audience until 5:30 p.m. This open discussion will be moderated by another former 13 artist awardee and a former head of the CCP Visual Arts, Ms. Karen Flores. And this will be until 5:45, like I said. Then from 5:45 to 6, we will have a summary by the moderator and the closing remarks of this afternoon. Then we encourage everyone, by 6 p.m. we will all head down to the CCP South parking lot for the Artists for Human Rights event, which will have another series of activities that I'm sure you are also quite aware of already. Our whole activity, our whole event for the day will end at 10 p.m. And we will have food and some drinks to help sustain everyone throughout the evening. So please, we encourage everyone to stay and to participate in this, what we'd like to hope is a important occasion. This is of course in cooperation with many organizations and groups, many to mention actually, but I'd like to say thank you to all of them for partnering with the CCP for this. Of course, this is in celebration of International Human Rights Day, which is on December 10. So I guess with that, we can begin with our first presenter. So if we can have Cian here in front, and then maybe Archie, Carlo, and Eisa can take the other seats here. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, I'm Cian. I've yet to figure out how to fit this all in 5 to 10 minutes. I have a generic PowerPoint presentation with 50 slides, so I guess I'll just throw you my spiel and then just briefly run through everything and then see where this goes. So I'm Cian, I'm an artist, I'm a researcher and an activist. I was trained as a painter, but I work on and with different platforms and media, from installation to sculpture and research and community-based work relatively recently. This is my undergrad thesis back in 2011. Some of you may have seen this outside the Vargas Museum grounds. It's called Artifacts, but I sort of just got like a generic image to stand in front of museum grounds, to play around the context of what museums do, how they function as educational or social institutions, and try to see how images and objects are decontextualized as they are placed within this institution or a museum. So recently, nung UAAP, maraming kumakalat din sa social media na image nito kasi prophecy daw siya na matatalo ng UP yung Ateneo tapos pinutol yung paa, but that didn't happen. So maraming ganyang layers of interpretation, and I guess that's pretty much how I sort of curate my artistic and intellectual trail of thought on how to discuss notions of history or narratives and spaces and power, and how they are reframed within institutions or objects like museums and monuments and maps and other institutionalized media. So this sort of hits two birds in one stone, monument and museum. This sort of, so like I have like other like monument-based installation works. Some may be like public or some may be very private. So Teis Ganda po this America talks about Philippine colonization and so some may not necessarily literally take the form of 3D and public formats. Some may be like within like oil painting format or imagery. Some imagery take the format of like paintings which go on exhibition. Some are reproduced in stickers, some are reproduced like online, and some are in some people's t-shirts around. So this is like a take-off from the chicken feet work. This is my first solo exhibition in 2013 wherein I had made a fictional ancient civilization out of its material past. So it's like reverse engineered archaeology. I had created like artifacts from ceramic and stone carving and different craftsy stuff, and all these objects were supported by literature I had made to support this fiction, which was employing the language of archaeology and Nat Geo style lyrical phraseology to build this idea of a fake of a archaeological exhibition. So it had a good like few months run, and school field trips would come in and the teachers would sort of show their students around it as if it was a real exhibition until they would see that necklace of fingers, and then so I guess the exhibition worked. Some images would support the display. So at the right, I had made a timeline of Philippine prehistory, and then I had superimposed my own invented prehistory into the Philippine prehistory, and then maps and diagrams. So I guess in my work, I also consciously, because I don't necessarily affiliate with any particular medium of artistic work from painting or sculpture or installation. I like to see things as entire exhibitions or the experience of an exhibition or viewing an exhibition. So I like to work with what's available in terms of museum collections and archival material. So this is a work that engages with a Vargas Museum collection, his literature, his memorabilia and objects, to sort of wield my own narrative within the exhibition space. So this particular exhibition talks about, from the objects of Jorge Vargas and my work with it, talks about peasant struggle and sugar production in Negros. Another exhibit. Sometimes I'd also use the idea or notions of a festival and ritual to talk about various social conditions. So in this exhibition in 2015, I had reappropriated the gallery space into the look and feel of a traditional fiesta. So I had used the material components and imagery and even sound of a fiesta to make work that would sort of discuss themes of Philippine social ills. The title of the exhibition is Spectacles of the Third World. And this is a 2017 exhibition, Busis Ibagha Layunan in Outpost in Bellas Artes. This was after an 8-month residency in Bataan, wherein I had sort of researched and integrated with the Aita communities in Bataan. So the exhibition is about their local history and culture and had a lot of collaborative projects with the communities. So here I present archival colonial photographs of the communities within the region and all the reproductions of literature I could find. Some work would respond to their mythologies, some work would respond to current social conditions. And here are some paintings from a previous exhibition also, entitled Allegories of Nation Building, wherein I had sort of used and responded to imagery and narratives of colonial history and sort of superimposed details of current issues. And off to works that here are various works that sort of deal with the idea of space and the representation of space, from landscapes to maps and diagrams. So as I read monuments, museums, and maps, I kind of like the idea of maps vaguely as very potent infographic material. So like I'll just sort of like go through like a bunch of map material to talk about not just space, but to talk about property and ownership and power. So at the back of all of these map projects and museum projects, I've been doing workshops since 2016. I've been going around communities to give counter mapping workshops. And the work I have outside is actually my first time to present it comprehensively as a different branch of my artistic practice. So, like, I'm not sure how much time I have left, but yeah, we can sort of continue this discussion later. So, while I'm sort of working on the idea of maps and like anting-antings as variations of maps and placing them within exhibitions that simulate a museum context. Yeah. So this is for example, like a map of Mindanao, plotting points of mineral extraction in large-scale agricultural plantations. Yeah, so these are samples of the ones outside. So yeah, that's my 50-something slides in 10 minutes. Thank you. All right, Archie.
You can see.
Oh, wait.
And then I think Carlo.
So if you have any, like later, you can just like have a conversation.
Thanks so much, Cian. So we'd like to call on Carlo Gabuco, who will be next. Okay, I also want to acknowledge some of our other 13 artist awardees who are here. Sir Noel Kizon, who's actually one of the jurors for this year's 13 Artist Awards. We also have Miss Phyllis Zavallero, one of the early female awardees in the 70s. I think Sir Egay, sorry. Sir Egay Fernandez here in the front. And I think Kiri Dalena also, who is actually part of the team that's organizing this. Okay, thank you. Carlo, Kim? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I'll just sit there.
Switch.
Good afternoon. I'm going to make this really short because I have a major long video that I want to show you. I think I want the video to speak for itself and not be because the past 2 years my work hasn't really been about me but about the people na I've encountered and who trusted us with their stories. So before I was more focused on painting, and then I remember 2016 I was preparing for an exhibit for a solo show. It was supposed to be a painting exhibit, and then the killing started happening. And then I think you may have heard of this statement several times. You cannot wage a war without killing, said the president. In the first place, I'd like to be frank with you. Are they humans? And what is your definition of human being? So, whenever he talks this way or talks about inciting murder or rape, people cheer for it. And for me, I don't know which is more unsettling. Him talking like that or people cheering. And then I started seeing people, like my friends, photographers, started posting pictures of people dumped in the streets with their heads wrapped in packing tape, with cardboard saying, I'm a drug addict, I'm a drug pusher, or something like that. And it deeply bothered me. So I decided to just stop painting, even canceled my exhibition, and just, because even before I'm always fascinated with the idea of photography, recording. So I felt restless and I just didn't want to be in my studio spending hours and hours just painting and not being outside. And it made perfect sense to me being out there since my work is mostly about the apathy in the society. And then so for me that was that thing that I saw, all the photos are just the exact pictures that I was painting before. So it made perfect sense to me. I remember seeing people. Actually, the process is very simple in a way, and it's also difficult. You go to a crime scene, you take pictures of the dead body. After that, you talk to the family. If they allow you, can interview them, or if not, they'll just say fuck off. In most cases, they'll say yes. In most cases, they're just in shock and just try and respond to your questions as much as they can. So anyway, the video that I'm gonna show you right now is part of the work that I did because I got this grant from the Magnum Foundation. It is not really about the drug war. It is more about, because I wanted to focus more on the children, on the generation. I think they're the victims of this whole killing. It's not the people who died, they're already dead. It's the children, the orphans. They are the generations gonna reap whatever this is happening. They are the ones who's carrying the stigma. They are the ones who need debriefing. And I don't think, there's only parang rough count kung ilan yung namatay. Let's say 20,000, of course the government's going to dispute that and parang playing with technical terms. But if, say, the killings is producing thousands, how many orphans do you think these killings have been producing over the past couple of years or 3 years, and still ongoing? So I want to focus on that. And I think, directly or indirectly, to some extent, this is going to affect everyone. So this is the video that I'm going to show. It's called Less Than Human. I can't speak for other artists, pero I think my role is, as a photographer, is to record this time that we live in. And hopefully maging siyang reminder for the next generation na something like this happened. And hopefully be able to prevent this from ever happening again. I've always been clear na sabi nga nila parang, I've never seen myself as a journalist, but of course, I publish this, parang whenever people tell me na bias ka, I've always been open and tell them na, yeah, I believe neutrality is consent. So, yeah, I get that bias. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. So next we have Archie Oclos. But while we are waiting for a bit, just want to acknowledge the presence of Sir Danilo Dalena, who is already here, and Miss Brenda Fajardo. And Jaime De Guzman is also here already. And I missed out earlier, our former awardee also, Leroy Nim. So Archie, your name? Archie Oclos.
Magandang araw po sa inyo na. Ako po si Archie Oclos, street artist. So, ayun. Wala na rin akong pila sa street art scene. Ginamit ko na yung full name ko as my name, Archie Oclos, kasi since nagkaroon na rin ako ng, survive din ako ng military harassment because of what I'm doing. Yung experience ng street art. Kaya naisip ko, kung na lang ako mag-alias, kasi hindi ko rin alam kung paano nila ako na-tunton or paano nila ako na makita. Anyway, yung konting background lang, came from a family of farmers sa Bicol. So, yung family background ko, magsasaka, tsaka mga manggagawa, mga construction worker. And then, siguro, open ako na lang sa yung naghuhugot ako at kung paano ako gumagawa sa kanya. Ngayon, since yung background ko, tapos nga sa military harassment, naka-survive din ako. And then, yung namatay yung anak ko. So, ang daming, yung tatlong story na yun, parang umiikot tayo yung mga gawa ko. So, it only talks about gawin mo magsaka, patutubo, about life and death. Yung parang fascinated ako to talk about the culture. Pero it's not about yung kung ano yung culture na usual na nakita natin na culture for tourism in it. Parang sa lahat ng mga ginagawa ko, it's about culture of violence. Yung pinaka-laman niya. Paano natin ma-appreciate yung value of life. So, ayun, share ko na lang siguro mga selected na street art ko. Yung una kong gusto share yung itagawa ko. Title na isa, Pulang Kulay ng Saya. So, itong street art ito, parang pinaglalang may perception of time. Kung ano yung maaaring iisip ng tao sa publiko. Sa araw, yung mga tao dyan, ginawa ko sa Cruz. So yung mga tao, yung mga nanay, mga event kids, isip nila ka nila about may rockstar concert or punk event, or masaya lang sila, ganyan. Tapos pagdating ng gabi, parang sa mismong public space, nag-iba na yung perception nila. Mayroon sanang tropang mag-iinuman sa tapat ng wall na yun, kaso bigla silang umalis doon kasi naisip nila yung takang na nagaganap na yun. Tapos mayroon din lumapit na matandang lalaki na sabi niya, takang ginagawa ko, and meron ng tatlong taong napatin sa mismong lugar. So basically, parang yung proseso ng paggawa ko, gusto kong engage yung publiko sa work itself. Siguro yung mismong work na to, sinasabi niyo dito yung normalization ng killings. Kung paano tayo nag-feed ng mga ibang media institutions yung killings eh normal lang, masaya, or for entertainment purposes. Pero pag ikaw na yung naka-experience na, nag-iib siya, nag-iib yung perception niya. Next is yung bugas dili bala. So yung sa dito naman, parang sa process ko rin ng paggawa, lagi ako nandun sa simplification process. Kung ano yung selective image ng simpleng imahe na maaaring ma-relate din ng publiko sa isang public space. Hindi to, it talks about yung yung sa flow ng tao sa isang kalye from left to right. Tapos, kwento siya ng
like the strength of the body in terms of how it relates to public space. So I guess this work really dissects and deconstructs how, for example, this urban fixtures of a flagpole is related with the body. So after several works around pole dancing, I got into macho dancing, which most of us know it's in our popular culture since the 70s. And what is particular with my works is I always integrate my body. So with this, I wanted to challenge how my body is formed, in the sense that my background was in classical ballet, coming from a middle class background, so it was both unlearning of habits that I have grown up with, at the same time really challenging my gender identity, my gender performativity. So this took a year of going back and forth to macho clubs and asking macho dancers to teach me. So it was a year-long process of understanding what exactly the formatting of the body that I had within my environment. Just for you to have an idea of the process, because my works are very much process-oriented and it takes years of reprogramming the body, what the body knows. So these are actual lessons with the macho dancers that I'm asked to teach me. So it's a lot of learning how to reorganize the spine, work with the illusion of volume and tonicity, which is in contradiction to what I know, which is the illusion of grace and lightness, which is both the core physical movements of pole dancing and ballet. And at some point, I did a solo exhibition in Margus Museum entitled Philippine Martial Academy. So it's basically a fictionalized institution of machismo, and it also refers to Philippine Military Academy, which is another form of macho institution. So in this institution, there were several classes that were held. Also, this manual was part of it. A stage and several artifacts and notating the macho vocabulary. So in a sense, I was putting it, appropriating it from the margins into the academic institution. And then at some point after, the workshop on pro dancing was in 2010, Macho Dancer was in 2013, and the host was in 2015. I was interested basically in Japanese. I was interested in this hybrid bodies of Filipino entertainers going to work in Japanese clubs and performing an idealized femininity or masculinity that is informed by the context of Japan. So in that sense, they were not only performing effective service, but it is effective service in the cultural context of Japan. And I was very much interested in how these entertainers were actually a repository of a hybrid culture between Filipino and Japan, which is never really talked about. It's most of the time, what is most of the time talked about is of course, victimization and the stigma around working in another country. But the fact that they are a cultural hybrid of both, or a cultural bridge to both the Philippines and Japan, in the Japanese context is, seldom explored. Really briefly kind of go through the trajectory because my works has a common thread of effective labor, Filipino service industry in the global context. And so basically my work for the 13th Artist Awards is a re-articulation of criticism of performance work in the theater context within the visual arts context. So basically, Princess. Let's say Happy Land is the umbrella project where Princess is the first part, and basically Happy Land investigates Filipino labor, the performance of happiness, and the production of fantasy within this happiness empire, which we play a huge part in supplying entertainers and workers. So Princess, to cut it short, basically hijacks this white-skinned archetype of Princess, Snow White, and programs her construction inside two Filipino bodies. So it's basically a hybrid figure of Snow White and the Filipino body. And what I find really interesting with this work is you're not really sure who's hijacking who, because we really faithfully try to copy Snow White, and at the end of the process, we were quite surprised that most of the material that we had was basically domestic work. So Snow White was basically cleaning the whole time, from the Queen's Palace to the Dwarf's Place to cooking for them, and compounded with the Filipino body, the domestic labor was definitely highlighted. At the same time, there's this idea of hijacking something that has been imposed and running away with it, and kind of, the corruption of the original copy is what I think is most powerful with this work. The fact that we insist that we're Snow White and we're brown bodies is something that is very uncomfortable for example, in the European context where this work has been toured. Yeah, so for the 13th Artist Awards, I further the hijacking of the visual landscape from the two-dimensional, the drawings, and then the dance, and then into public space. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eisa. So we will now go for a quick 5-minute break. We just need to reconfigure our seats to make way for our more senior artists. So I'd like to ask everyone to please clear the main gallery first and have some snacks outside. And then we resume in 5 minutes. Thank you. So with us, our presenters for this half will be Mr. Jaime De Guzman, Mr. Danilo Dalena, and Ms. Brenda Fajardo. After each of their presentations, we'll have a discussion moderated by Ms. Karen Flores, including the 4 presenters that spoke earlier today. So Kiri, who will go first? Okay, Kiri Dalena, everyone.
Okay, I'd like to call Ali, Ali Escandor. And maraming salamat CCP. So we are part of Rest Back, Respond to Break the Silence Against the Killings, and we are very happy to launch the first iteration of the Memory Project. And to explain the Memory Project, we'll just read very quickly the idea or the idea behind it. So Ali Escandor.
It's a little bit lengthy, so I hope you bear with me. Okay, so 40 to 30 years ago, the Philippines had already incurred foreign debts of up to $24 billion and was the first Asian nation that was in serious danger of falling into a debt trap. So you all know what a debt trap is, right? In an attempt to make the country look healthier financially, the Bangko Sentral will overstate our foreign reserves by $500 to $600 million. So how was this justified? What was the justification? There was little accounting, but the Marcoses had what we now call an edifice complex. And this building, Cultural Center of the Philippines, or CCP, was one such edifice. Based on documents recovered, the original budget for this building was, would you know, 15 million pesos. By December 1968, the cost had already reached 48 million. But only 3/4 of the work was finished. Imelda then sought a $7 million loan abroad. This prompted calls for a Senate investigation into the project. But what Imelda wants, Imelda gets. So even to this day, I would say. And so by 1972, the CCP was burdened with a debt amounting to 63 million pesos, incurred mainly from the construction of the theater alone. So given all this, I would say this building would rival the cost of Trump's Taj Mahal, which was also built the same in the 1990s, but it would cost the same. So, right after the proclamation of martial law in 1972, the instruments of censorship were unleashed. The Army Office of Civil Relations granted licenses for new magazines and newspapers, imposed guidelines which were often arbitrary. Under these guidelines, there was no room for criticism, there was no room for anything that was critical of the army or the family. So imagine it was the military that was judging what then was good literature, what was good art, what was good journalism. It was the army censors that determined which was good enough for the public. So plenty of artists, writers, members of the arts and literature community opposed this. But many also acquiesced. Ferdinand Marcos would showcase his power through arts and culture using cinema, photographs, and monumental images. If you can, I'm sure you all know his bust in Tuba and Benguet. Meanwhile, Imelda would focus on the accumulation and display of fine art, and in the process projected herself as the custodian of culture and of acquired taste, a woman of acquired taste. Arts and culture lent itself to aesthetize and perfume the Marcos rule. They strengthened the myth of the new society and the mythology of Malakas and Maganda. Ferdinand as Malakas and Imelda as Maganda. Many will definitely argue that the Marcoses were instrumental in the thriving art scene in the past. But we ask, at what cost and what kind of art? Today, we are seeing this new nexus of celebrity, power, and revisionism, where a musician can claim that the ceaseless deaths in the drug war is worth it, and that an artist can be celebrated as a feminist, even as if she fawns over the president, who glorifies the raping and aggression against women. So we approach this topic today. Artists and their role and human rights, and the role of the art community within that. We approach this topic not with naivety, but with a terrible knowledge of the awesome power of the arts in the making or in the unraveling of our country. We call this the Memory Project, and this is hopefully the first of many events under this project. For the present is where the past and the future fuse, and the memory is the means by which the past can commune with the present. The act of remembering is not naive. It is not innocent. Remembering does not come to a person innocently. Remembering is imbued with our political consciousness. It is weighed down by our dispositions, our conditions, our exposure, our individual experiences as citizens, as Filipinos, as artists. The best kind of remembering is actually reflective and discursive. Not a simple matter of engagement with political issues or artistic style, but engagement with the past in the creation of new types of ideas, new forms of knowledge, from which a new future may take over and take root. It is this type of remembering that we need today. As we situate our art and ourselves in the present, and as we grapple with our roles in the future, will we become agents toward the making of this country or its unraveling? The Memory Project is our urgent intervention, to borrow from Arundhati Roy. It is our urgent intervention to imagine a better future for all of us. As in Benedict Anderson's ubiquitously cited phrase, we are engaged in examining how the Philippines exists as an imagined community, through memory and through nostalgia. But in remembering, we must also incorporate critical reflections of our premises, our myths, our fantasies, an examination and acknowledgement of its precise history and context of longing. The overriding ethical concern now is to revisit the violent and oppressive consequences of the past, to parse and unpack the responsibility of the artist in the future, our collective future.
Thank you very much, Eisa Jocson. So now we would like to dedicate the first iteration of the Memory Project to Alice Guillermo, a writer, beloved art critic who passed away early this year, as well as to Ray Casambre, a peace advocate who lent us the books of Alice Guillermo. For this, he was arrested the other night on false charges. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Karen Ocampo Flores.
Magandang hapon. Earlier this afternoon, we heard critical points from the works explained by our current 13 artists and artists. And now, we must make a convergence to connect these critical points, to return to the past, and to understand our connectedness. It is an important moment that we can have this recollection. We can listen to the 13 artists too, of the early days of the award, of the early years of the award, and also to pass on. We realize that there is a lot of also passing on what we must endeavor to work for, to struggle for, and to accomplish as artists. As we are, of course, recollecting memories from the CCP, our introductions will, of course, be based on the CCP Encyclopedia of the Arts. Also, just recently launched this, the second edition, launched earlier this November. We will have 3 speakers, and first we will have Jaime De Guzman, who was born in 1942. He is known as a painter and potter. He studied at the University of Santo Tomas. He finished his fine arts degree at the University of the Philippines in 1967. He held his first one-person show at the Solidaridad Gallery. While in Mexico, where he went to study mural painting, this is where he also was inspired to take up pottery. So with this shift to pottery, his whole family, his wife Anne and his children, took up also this discipline. And from there on, with this work in pottery, he has lived in Laguna, Candelaria, Quezon, and the Sagada Mountain Province. He has dedicated himself to promoting the art of pottery in rural communities. It is a sparse introduction, but again, of course, we will have the opportunity to learn more of Jaime De Guzman's involvement in the martial years. He is also, by the way, a third artist awardee of 1970. After him, sitting next to him will be Danilo Dalena, also known as Danny. He was born in 1942 in Pasay, Laguna. He's a painter and illustrator in the 1960s and the 70s, and he's known to have experimented in various media. He's known for his political cartoons, having done illustrations for Asia Philippine Leader and Philippines Free Press. And among his most known works are Alibang and the first the Pakil and Hayalay series. As a young awarded a CCP 13 Artist Awardee in 1972. And finally, the sharing will be the last of the sharing will be from Brenda Fajardo. She was born in Manila on February 1940. A painter, a printmaker, a stage designer, art educator, and curator. From the late 70s and the 80s, she worked in stage production with the Philippine Educational Theater Association. She worked more recently with PETA. Continued to work more recently with PETA. As a set and costume designer, actress, and director. And her visual artworks tackled Filipino folk and mythological characters as a way of navigating the personal and the political and the personal. Her works deal with contemporary issues like women's rights, human rights, corruption, migration. She has conducted art workshops that help in the development of community arts in regions. She's also a co-founder of the Philippine Art Educators Association, the Kasibulan, the Baglan Art and Culture Initiatives for Community Development, and the Lubhasa sa Sining at Kultura or desk. In 1992, she received the CCP 13 Artist Awards. So with this introductions, we will now be hearing from them on these points of memory.
So, Jaime De Guzman, round of applause.
Thank you very much. Salamat ng marami sa inyo. Okay. Let's applaud it. Yes, I remember this. This was inspired by Dante Alighieri, and also inspired by the town, our folk character. At that scene, on the right side, he's 1971. Yes, by that time you were already living in Kenya. It's my hometown. Oh, this is much earlier. This is my first painting that was kind of it's composite of experiences of being in the Visayas and having gotten hold of a beautiful picture of a lady in one of the casinos in Negros. And then the figures around are forms that have been entering my paintings. I can't exactly explain how they go into it, but these are like forms and call it, it's like sticks, but they are in the red cloud. It just happens. And all these elements come together to a painting. I can't quite explain. Usually landscapes of my mind.
This Inanlaya,
Yes.
the march to my country
Yes.
in 1967.
I first exhibited this at Solidaridad Gallery.
Abajo Las
Around
Almas.
Lazano.
It's undated, but circa 1960s.
Yes. And I can't quite recall now.
Well, this one, you asked me to look for, the only painting that Jaime asked us to look for was actually Las Flores para Dante, when I said that it was about martial law. Now it becomes clear that it was because also he connected it also to Dante Buscaino. The rest of the images that I am showing now, or we are showing now, are more of the works which I selected for him, but I also sent him the title. So this can be the first time that he's looking again at the works.
Yes.
So you can tell us if you want to go forward.
You want to go to the next?
Yes.
To the next.
Forward.
Move forward.
Okay.
It's Sabbath of the Witches, 1970.
Yes. Yes. It's actually what started it was an invitation that I was doodling. I was doodling on that invitation. And it happens to be the invitation for a dinner. And a lot of artists were invited. I think most of the Philippine artists then were invited to go and have a party. And I was doodling it, and this came out. And then I did a print of this in lithograph. And I included that card in that whole presentation. And this one, I wrote in it from that drawing. Yeah.
You're Guzman?
Are you?
I lived in it. It was in my living. And recently it was building day for the park in Quezon City.
The tile now?
Yeah, but tayo ng mga bayan. And it ended up there. So it's on your mind.
Next is a quote more from Alice Guillermo.
Yeah, okay. Well, in De Guzman, the historical theme of the anti-colonial revolution created reverberations into the present struggle. In periods of crisis, many artists have shown an allegorical direction, as in the case of Balagtas and Juan Luna, so as to disguise the protest or revolutionary message, which otherwise would have drawn unwanted attention and even persecution from the authorities. Also, at this early stage of the protest movement against the Marcos dictatorship, potent community symbols had not yet crystallized. Thus, the artists had to draw symbols from the tradition of struggle. This is from Alice Guillermo, Protest Revolutionary Art in the Philippines.
This one, after I came back from Mexico, I had the idea of urging the municipal government to get the materials so that I paint a mural at the municipio. And this is it. Based from legends or folklore of the bird. And get the I painted this 73. And it's still there. I'm glad I've taken care of it.
Where is it located? Where is it
It's
located?
in my hometown, in Levy.
Ah, it is in Liliu. Okay, so
You also told us that this mural is dedicated to your grandfather, Fausto.
My grandfather, Fausto, was a musician, a revolutionary. He was a military public. So he's quite known it down as the old man, his familia gentleman.
Okay. So the grandfather of Jaime De Guzman was a Katipunero who served under
And the Luna.
General Luna. Okay. So more pictures.
This was part of a drawing show I had at the Cultural Center of drawings. 1970.
This is from the CCP. And then for the next slide, I'll read it. So this is from the same, earlier on we showed a scan of it's Wednesday. If it's a Wednesday, this must be Cultural Center. Art for Politics, Politics for Art by Ms. Lacaba. So that was an image from an article about the first day, the launch of the Cultural Center in the Philippines, where 3 artists launched an instant demo at the balcony. So these are Mars Galang, the 13 artist recipient also in 1970, David Medalla, also poet Junlan Sang. But if you read the full article, later on it mentions this part, which is connected to our talk. So from Jose Lacaba, so I read it. Yes, politics so pervades our life that even those artists who shun it like the plague find themselves stricken by it, which is precisely what happened to Jaime De Guzman, the painter, who suddenly woke up one morning to find his name in a full-page newspaper ad as part of a committee on arts and sciences making a declaration of support for Marcos and Lopez. This, as he wrote in a strong letter of protest, without prior notice and consent. So there is nothing intrinsically wrong in any artist's proclaiming his political allegiance. Michelangelo did magnificent masterpieces for the Borgias, and there is no reason why Filipino artists cannot serve or simply sympathize with the present dispensation, whose reputation is surely better than that of the Borgias. What's wrong is the use of art and artists by politicians to serve their own ends. This is as bad as the use of political power to force the anti-establishment artists into submission. The political propagandist who has so little regard for a man's name that he can use it as freely as toilet paper in a public lavatory is just one side of the coin, whose other side is the cop who twists the arm of anyone rude to the establishment, to the established order or contemptuous of it. So the context is, the police twisted David Medalla's arm that night when they were ushering him out of the protest. But can you tell us about this incident?
No, I didn't know anything about this. I just read about it. I mean, someone must have used my name for this kind of propaganda. So I wrote a letter to the editor and telling him that I had involvement in it.
Thank you.
This is my younger brothers, George and Bobby, who were at that time kind of involved in political going on, but in our town, localized. And get their friends together and do their thing, go to the mountain, and whatever. But that time I was already had my own life, my family. they were involved in the general.
Okay, 3 minutes. Okay. I'm sorry. So it was mentioned.
Yeah, here. You would like to, okay, yes. Yes, the national chapter of the NPAA had its headquarters at the Calayan Center along Quezon Avenue in the building fronting Aberdeen Court. The members put up a gallery, the walls of which were entirely lined with their paintings down in cardboard. At the back of the building was Jaime De Guzman's studio. His brothers Bobby and George De Guzman were with the NPAA while he was an ally and advisor for art techniques.
NPAA is the nagkakaisang progresibo artista at arkitekto. It was one of the first activist cultural organizations which came out of the Kabataang Makabayan non-protest organization, which was declared illegal in 1972. Do you recall this, Jaime, about sharing a building?
Oh yes, the Kabataang Makabayan headquarters were at the fourth floor, the top floor of this building, and my apartment was just as you go up the stairs. So I was kind of aware of what was going on at that time, and it was a bit kind of aware of me also downstairs. Anyway, there were also other artists then living in that apartment. One was Franklin Boy and Ben Norman. We were all living in the same apartment complex.
We'll proceed to the scenario. Added to the words of the words. Okay. This is a photograph you taken, and behind you is the Gombursa from 1972. Can you tell us about the Gombursa?
I think it was just so happens that it fell about the same time as the centenary of the martyrdom of the priest. That I sort of, or maybe it was, it's been a long time ago, and I don't know really the consequences, but that I was influenced by the idea of the martyrdom of the three priests that inspired the revolution.
And this one,
Metamorphosis. I don't know how to explain something like this. It just happens. Maybe the time, all those arches, maybe from forms.
This was in 1970, 2 years earlier than Gombursa Martyrs.
2 years earlier?
Yes, 2 years earlier. Oh, same year. Same year.
Yes, that's right. I did those series of exhibit for the 13 artists.
So both Metamorphosis and this one were for your 13 artists?
No, there were 3 other metamorphoses. 2 metamorphoses, there are 3 actually. 3 metamorphoses. This was,
So this.
I think they still have it here.
Yes.
yes. So it has always been exhibited here.
It first exhibited at the 13 artists, and then Okay.
Yes. Well, this was a portrait when I was a student at UP. The model is Joaquin, yes. Joaquin. Memory.
Okay, so this is also from the archives of the CCP Visualizing Simulation.
It was at the at UP.
Last slide. Here.
It's doing pottery. I think I did it for 10 years probably. In my family and my kids. We did it in Candelaria. First we did it in Lilio. And then Candelaria and then Sakana. And I enjoyed it. It's really something worthwhile to learn. And even up to now, my kids are still doing it.
Thank you. Jaime De Guzman. And now, we turn to Carlo Gabuco, Danilo Dalena.
Okay, so it says there, Cultural Center of the Philippines.
Ito yung para application ko sa, hindi ko alam na meron pa ng application para mag-20 na sa CCP.
Bio lang, bio. It was the bio that's required for the 13 artists.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, nasulat ko tatlong pangalan doon na sinasabi na collector ko rin nila.
Significant collectors. Significant collectors?
Okay. Ang pangalan nila ay si Pete Lacaba,
Bobby Chabet,
and
Johnny Cocuadra.
Isipin mo yan, ha? Nangyamang pa ng dalawa niya, si Johnny Lacaba. At ang totoo na mamaya, may kaya din ay si Bobby. Nagkatanong taong yun, wala naman talagang nakakabili ng trabaho dahil hindi siguro na kursunada. Kaya yan ang tulad ko ng mga pangalan.
Next. Ito lang ang quotation. Which one? Maybe start.
The beginning of protest art was associated with journalism in its day-to-day reporting of events and its grappling with national issues. Some of the best protest art in the popular form of editorial cartoons appear in magazines, such as the Philippines Free Press and Asian Philippines Leader. Danilo Dalena was the top political cartoonist as he consistently satirized public figures led by Marcos and his cronies and the ubiquitous figure of Uncle Sam.
Hindi ako talaga gumagawa ng mga cartoons, lalo na yung mga seryosong cartoons na tawag na natin yung political cartoons. Nagkataon lamang na nung magkaroon kami ng labor union sa Philippine Free Press, nagkaroon kami ng mass resignation at ako'y kasama ni Nico Kin, Pete Lacaba, Greg Villantes, at mga iba pa na magagaling na manunulat sa English at sa Filipino. Nang kami magtayo ng Asia Philippines Leader, Sinik ang naging editor. Ang capital niya ay Jacinto. Malaki ang aking pag-anga kay Nick. At ako naman ay tuwang-tuwa na ako ang kanyang kapisin na gumawa ng political cartoons pag siya ay gumagawa ng editorial. Sinabi ko sa kanya ng diretsyo na baka hindi ko kakayanin. Pero sabi mo sa akin, ayan mo yan, ayan tumayag ako dahil lagi ko siya kasama pag kami nag-uusap at lagi niya ako napapapayag dahil napapatarap ako ng inom ng beer. Hindi ako mayroon kausapin pagka kami nakakasama ni Nick. Walang pagkakataon na hindi ay hindi na naman ako ang may ideya nito. Pag kami nag-uusap ni Nick sa magazine, talaga nag-uusap kami ng matindi at may idea siya, may idea ako. Magkukwento siya, magkukwento rin ako. Sa madalit sabi, nagagawa ko yan nang hindi na ako kailangang mag-report pa sa kanya kung kailangan gawin sa opisina. Pagkatapos tayo nag-usap, inuwi ka sa bahay at doon ko ginagawa. Makikita na lang kami pagtapos na at deadline ko ng cartoon. Madalas nangyayari na pagka ako'y may deadline ay laging pahabol. Ika nga parang tamang-tama lang na sasakay na sa makina. Yung section ng kasi talagang hindi naman agad-agad ako pag sinabi mo, mag-drawing ka. Sige agad, drawing ako. Hindi ako ututo Nagagawa kong habulin yan at isang beses lang ang pagkakataon na nalit ako kay Nick at ako'y na kanya nasabon. Pero bumupa agad dahil nasa oras siya ng pag-inom.
Para dun sa makananis na si Nick Joaquin was the editor-in-chief ng Asia Philippines Leader. So all of the political editorial cartoons you were showing are from Asia Philippines Leader. Si Danilo Dalena ay nagtrabaho ng matagal sa Philippines Free Press, but it was only in Asia Pacific Leader that he was able to really draw this.
Yung mga trabaho sa Asia Philippines Leader ay napaka-ikling panahon lamang. Nagtagal ng magazine ng mga siguro kulang-kulang na 2 taon. Anak, ipakibalik mga sa mga nauna.
I saw that.
Yung hindi, isa. Yan. Kamukha yung trabaho ko yan ay pinapakita ko lamang dyan na para bang maraming bawal, maraming hindi mo dapat gawin, no? Yung idea ko dyan nang pinababa ko si Andres Bonifacio para sumama sa mga nagpuprotesta. Naalala ko rin yung kwento na narinig ko sa ibang tao na tawa ng tawa na tungkol sa pagbaba ni Bonifacio sa monumento. Ang naalala ko naman ay yung si Cristo na nakapako sa krus ay may nagdadasal sa kanyang harapan na walang paulit-ulit na nagsisisiraw siya, pero inuulit-ulit niya yung mga kasalanan niya. Ang sabi ni Cristo na nakapako sa krus ay kung bigla ako nakapako dito sa road, bababa ako at sisipain kita. Yun, kaya dyan ako nagkaroon ng ideya. Para sa ito naman si Makoy na to, ay ginawa ko lamang na nagsasalita sa media na ewan ko ba kung yung mga sinasabi niya ay tapat sa loob niya. Pakipalit na yan ang gustong mangyari ng mga tao na pabagsakin ng mga kabataan sa gusto nila talagang gawin na talagang matigas sila at hindi nila mapapayagan mangyari.
Untitled, what ails the student body?
Pero makita mo namin yung kamay ng bata, talagang hindi siya papayag na may mangyari yung bitama. Ito yung panahon ng pinag-iinitan yung mga pagkakapong araw na mahaba ng buhok na pinakita ko lang na hindi naman pilot sa trabaho. Pero may naligan ng babae na mahaba na ng buhok at kasama sa napahado sa mga hindi dapat bubita ng mga yun lang. Ayan ang kasayahan at kaligayahan ng mga lipstick na yan. Papati-pati, nakala mo walang problema ang bayan. Yung mga tao na kunwari akala mo mahal naman tayo, pero puro sila ang kanilang sarili, ang kanilang asikatong mahalin sa lahat ng klaseng bagay, pera o power. Ito na yung simula na parang hindi na maganda ang tanaw, ang pananaw ng mga kababayan natin sa pagpapatakbo ng mga panahon ni Marcos. Ito na yung naging trabaho naman sa Sunday Times Magazine na bilang naman ang araw bago lumipat si Makoy, ay ginawa ko yung cartoon na yun. Pero lumabas sa Bensa na bati na yung mga
March 1996.
Ang February na
26. 25.
Ang una kong ginawa bago pa siya lumipat sa papuntang Hawaii.
So, okay.
Tulad ko.
Ngayon, mag-proceed tayo.
Ito na siguro yung pinulat ni Brenda Fajardo.
Yes.
Na tungkol sa protesta na may namatay na estudyante.
Okay.
Yan na ba yun?
Ito kasi, itong exhibit na to sa nasa Solidaridad Gallery, parang third solo exhibit ni Danilo Dalena, just a month before the declaration of martial law. And dito niya nilabas yung kanyang political cartoons and the plastic sculptures.
Toilet series?
At toilet series. So,
ito yung sculpture ko ng estudyante na ang title ko ay Alay kay Santa Brigida. Nagkataon na naroon ako sa area na yun na malapit sa pinangyarihan dahil madalas ako na nakisimba sa Hayalay. Nung mangyari yun ay naramdaman ko na kailangan kong gawin ng trabaho yan. naikwento sa akin ng detalye kung paano siya pinagpupukpok ng walang awa hanggang siya ay mamatay. Pinamitan siya ng mga batuta.
Si Santa ang pangalan niya ay si Enrique Santa Brigida, estudyante ng Lyceum na pinatay ng pulis noong March 3, 1978. Ito yung panahon ng first quarter storm. Tapos, gumawa rin yung national artist na si Amado B. Hernandez ng isang tula na una niyang binasa sa funeral march ni Enrique Santa Brigida. And ito rin yung huling tula ni Amado B. Hernandez. Para lang makita mo, Dad, may mga nahanap kami na litrato ng funeral. So yung sculpture na yun ni Daddy ay nahanap namin kay Alfredo Roses na nasa Australia. Akala namin wala nang existing na.
Ito yung part ng trabaho ko na pananamasilo. Ang title ko dyan ay 3 minutes to 1. Madalas kasi ako na halos kaputan ng curfew. Kaya gumawa ako ng ganyung klaseng painting na hinahabol nila yung oras na huwag sila matadampot pag nakakabutan sila ng talabunan ng madaling araw. Pinakita ko dyan sa painting na yan na mukhang malabo na na mga lampas sila ng hamak nung bago mag-alauna. Kaya sigurado huli lahat yung mga nakasakay sa jeep. Naalala ko rin yung pagkakataon na nung ginawa yung curfew na yan, ay may nangyayari sa akin na madalas kasi ako nasa Mabini at inaabot ako ng mag-alauna kaya doon ako natutulog sa beer house, sa may bubungan ng beer house hanggang sa umaga. At isang beses din yung galing naman ako Alibamba at inaabot ko na pag hindi ako abutan na alauna. Nung pauwi na ako ng bahay, ay may humarang sa aking barkada at binigyan ako ng flying kick. Pinagkatuwa niya nila ako pag-practicean ng mga natutunan na kay Bruce Lee. Tumawag ako ng pulis, pero yung pulis nakatayo lang doon at ngiti-ngiti lang, wala siyang ginawa. Lintik na pulis yan. Yun lang ang mga naisip ko na at isa pang gumawi siya ay sa grupo namin kay Erwin Castillo, Joel Cuadra at sa akin ay naroon kami sa opening ng Youth Gallery, opening ng show ni Brenda. Nag-upit kami ng mga tao, mga security o mga tao ng mga kanya na may mga dagang boga. Ako ay nahampas ng napalot ng bote ng beer sa noo at si Jolly ko at si Erwin ay tumumba at parit kong duguan at yung sugat sa noo ko ay bumukas at matagal ko na pagaling. Yan tuturo ko sa eskwela ay lagi ko may benta sa loob na para kung si Cesar Ramirez kung sa pelikula niya na Untitled Chapter. Yan. Tawang-tawa ko doon dahil lagi ko nagtatawa na lagi ko may benta dito sa ulo na hindi ko tinatanggal. Susunod na. Ito naman si Pete Lataga na madalas ko rin kasama. Pag kami lumalabas, ito yun ay ginawa ko ng tamang kalalabas-labas sa pagkakapit niya ng kung ilang taon niya tayo. Ang dapat agad, ako pinuntahan sa bahay at sinabi niya na, Dani, nakawala na ako. Ayan, gano'n. Kaya, tuwa naman ako at hindi ko malaman ang gagawin ko sa kanya sa katuwaan ko. Ang nagawa ko na lamang ay niyaya ko siya sa Alibangbang para wala naman akong maisip na pagdadalan sa kanya. Ano naman nadali ko siya sa ibang lugar na hindi ko naman gusto. Ganyan kami lagi na magkakasama. Hindi ko maaasahan na pupunta ng lugar na hindi gusto. Kaya nung isa namang beses na kasama ko si Brenda Fajardo, lumabas kami at nag-ikot sa Quiapo ng gabi. Inabot kami ng madaling araw at niyaya ko si Pete naman sa isang barberia sa Tetuan para magpagupit ng madaling araw.
Barberia.
Tetuan po yun.
Barberia.
Bagay yung pin. At pagkatapos namin magpagupit, kami tumuli sa Plata Miranda para makinig ng mga debate ng mga iba-ibang grupo tungkol sa reliyon. May Katoliko, may Iglesia ni Cristo, may Born Again, yun. Kaya inabot kami talagang tutuhanan ng umaga. Ng araw na yun ay deadline namin pare-pareho sa free press. Nakapasok ako sa free press para gawin yung trabaho ko. Si Pete ay absent. Hindi siya nakapasok. Ngayon, dumating si Nix at hinahanap si Pete. Nalaman niya sa mga kasama ko sa free press na kasama ko si Pete ng gabing
Nagbarberia kayo.
kami dalawa ng magkasama.
Oo.
Ang ginawa ni Nick, sabi niya agad Tani, pasok ka sa kwarto. Yan, galit na galit. No? Pero yung salita niya na, Tani, alam ko galit agad. No? Pasok ka sa kwarto. Pagpasok ko sa kwarto, talagang sinitigawan na ako. Tapos, dahil hindi na nakapasok si Pete, at sinabi niya sa akin agad pinukurak ko rin si Pete. Natalanan ko ba yun? Tumama siya sa akin.
So, ito lang parang context. So, I was jobless in 1972. I'm still jobless now, but I don't intend to work with anybody else but with the old group. So, yun nga, nawalan ng trabaho dahil sa martial law, pinasarado yung mga magazines. So, for a long time, nag-struggle. Binanggit lang dito yung mga, ang kalamihan ng mga kasama niya are writers. And to round up the circle of his drinking mates, trio of artists, Bobby Chabet, Mars Galang, and Jaime De Guzman. Okay, last slides.
Kung wala akong trabaho, parang desperado na talaga ako na wala na akong mapupuntahan ng direksyon dahil na makahanap ng may pera sa bulsa. Nagkataon naman na nalaman niya ng isang tao na nakasabay ko sa Universitarian School Organ ng UST. Siya ay sa Malacanang nagtatrabaho. Pinuntutan niya ako na pumunta ng Malacanang at baka naman daw mabigyan niya akong trabaho. Punta naman ako. Dahil desperado na talaga ako eh. Basta magkatrabaho namin. Pagkatapos sa Malacanang, pinausap niya ako. Tapos na-meet ko muli si Kitata. Nag-hello lang sa kanya. Tapos, ang tao na naging mabait sa akin para tulungan ako ay si Alcasuga. Anyway, nung naroon ako, pinakita sa akin ni Alcasuga yung mga magazine na pagpipilihan ko. Wala akong nagustuhan at hindi ko talaga masigmura na gano'n na magiging trabaho ko. Kasi nung nasa Carmelo Bagan ako, sinipa ako doon dahil hindi ko gusto ginagawa ko. Ang nangyari dito ay hindi ko agad tinanggap yung offer niya at umalis ako ng Malacanang na napakabigat ang loob ko dahil parang hindi ko yata magagawa na magtrabaho sa Malacanang at ganyan pa na parang mabababoy na ako talaga. Nung ako naglalakad na palayo na, may tumawag sa akin na Dani, nanalo ka. Yan, nanalo ako. Ang tao na tumatawag sa akin si Rene Castillo, isang printmaker. May nakakilala ba kayo Rene Castillo dito? Kaya ayaw mo mag-utot gano'n naman pala. Hindi ko siya nakikita. Hindi ako nakapaniwala na totoo yung kanyang balita sa akin. Parang ang pakiramdam ko na sa sobrang tuwa ko talagang napaiyak na rin ako. At para pa akong niligtas ng aking Anghel de la Guardia. At yan ang dahilan na nagbuo sa isip ko na hindi ako mas kailangang guman. Dapat sumuko pag tumadating sa punto na parang wala ka ng pag-asa.
It helps to remember that before you were an artist, you're a human being. Ayun, parang okay lang na may label na ganyan. So, saka nag-exhibit kami as a group, di ba? Kaya masaya.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. Okay. And with that, magandang kumonekta tayo ngayon sa ating mga bata, current 13 artists. And we'll ask for each of you to make a response to the sharing made by our artists here. So we'll start with wala ka muna. O sino mo gusto magsimula? Pati nila para at bago natin buksan ang forum para sa mga, I'm sure marami pa kasi magtatanong mag-respond.
We have 5 minutes left.
Yes.
Let's see if we can response.
Response to their sharing. We'd like to each
Sige, yun dun sa sharing, tas tinatry i-compare kung ano yung climate politically. Ano yung conditions na ginagalawan natin as artists at pag-assess kung ano nga ba yung artist. Technically, manggagawa din naman tayo. Pero meron parang extra platform tayong ginagalawan. Mayroong parang itong character or persona na naglilikha ng sining at kung ano man yung ibig sabihin nun sa iba't ibang levels. So parang araw-araw din tayo maraming finiface na contradiction. Kaya tayo nandito ngayon kasi yung kanya-kanyang artistic practice natin ay parang nag-reflect sa panahon, sa kanya-kanyang panahon, nung nakaraan, ngayon, sa hinaharap. Pero at the same time, parang ano yung scope at limitation ng artistic practice kung mananatili siya sa museum or sa gallery or sa theater na nasa safe, hindi naman safe, pero parang may extra layer of hindi mo alam kung posterity at yung context ng 13 artists na ngayon ay award na at pagtanggap nito mula sa estado. Hindi ko alam kung ramdam ko yung patronage ng estado sa pagtanggap ng 13 Artists Award. Hindi rin siya masyado naka-apekto dun sa sustainability ng practice ko. Kasi kanya-kanyang galawan at diskarte na rin naman yun. If anything, nung natawagan ako at nasabi na napili ako bilang isang 13 Artists Award, hindi ko alam kung masaya kasi parang yung bigat ng award ay parang depende sa'yo kung paano mo take at marami ka rin parang peers na parang so may award ka ngayon na naman. So ano ibig sabihin nun? So yun lang, parang conscious.
It won't be a similar opening of doors in your case. So.
Yeah.
Unlike in their time.
So at the same time, parang yun lang din, parang tinatry mong constantly assess at reassess yung sarili mong practice o yung sarili mong role. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng cultural work.
Archie, this question is not necessarily, not necessarily in the context of the artists.
Yeah, but
I'll just explain a little bit para lang.
yeah.
The 13 artists was just a way to frame it kasi halimbawa, the telling of their lives before goes beyond the 13 Artist Award. So if we respond, it doesn't necessarily have to be within the context of the 13 artists, but with what their lives were like as artists during the 70s and the 80s.
So, kasi parang start, tapos yung parang dinulat sa akin na yung art kailangan mag-respond dun sa panahon. So, I guess parang yung sensibility na yung tumatak na sa akin hanggang ngayon na nag-start ako mag-focus sa photography and multimedia, parang mas may sense, mas tama na nag-photography ako kasi parang gusto ko din nandun ako sa labas, nakikita ko lahat first hand. For me, mas ano yun mas okay na paraan para matuto more than parang books. Minsan daw na kontento. Gusto kong nandun, gusto kong makita, gusto kong makamoy, gusto kong marinig. Mahirap man, masaya, o ano man. At least nandun ako sa labas. Yung pag-award ng certain artist, parang, okay, parang kasi akin, tinitam siya sa platform to engage. Kasi feeling ko iba-ibang parang tinatry ko parang itindihin kung paano mag-engage ng maayos, lalo sa panahon na to. Dun sa viewers, feeling ko kasi may iba-ibang paraan, may iba-ibang parang way or iba-ibang klaseng audience. So iba rin yung audience dito. Ayoko naman maging parang i-classify yung gano'n, pero parang yun yung reality na nakikita ko. So ito, parang ang naniniwala lang din ako na parang ako yung trabaho ko, tingin ko parang ang role naman niya is not parang change the world, hindi naman gano'n, but at least to add to the, like sinasabi, add to the discussion, na to elevate, parang in a way, parang gano'n na. And yun nga, yung pagiging critical, parang, di ba, parang, yun naman yung role.
Yeah.
Para sa akin, yun naman yung role ng isang artist, isang visual artist. And to question. So parang, in a way, may for me, nasabi nga na parang stage yung nag-award, all the more na maging mas critical tayo sa stage.
Yeah.
At least, yun.
So that's So, Archie Oclos, thank you. Carlo.
Ako po, siguro sa award, parang hindi ko masyadong isip talaga yung award. Kasi parang mas nakita ko lang talaga siya ng isang stage, isang magandang platform, kung ano pa talaga yung lagi mong ginagawa. Tapos ako Ako, yung sa, parang nakita ko lang po yung sa noon sa ngayon. Siguro parang minamaximise ng artist kung ano yung medium or genre nung ginagawa nila para to narrate things na nangyayari sa paligid. Siguro po yung sa case ko naman, mas gumawa lang po siguro ako ng mas madami pang street art nung at first hand kasi experience ko talaga yung military harassment. So sobrang siyang nakakatakot talaga na experience. Parang nakakabaliw din talaga. Mental, psychological, lahat. Parang hindi mo alam kung dahil nag-drawing ka lang or dahil nag-paint ka, tapos your life is at risk na agad. Parang siguro doon ko naisip, ano ba talaga yung kaya ko pong magawa? Or ano yung role ko talaga bilang artist? So siguro ngayon, mas pinipiga ko lang talaga ngayon kung ano yung maximum level din ng street art. Kaya mas ini-engage ko din siya sa mga delikadong communities na hindi pa napupuntahan na. Pero pagdating kasi sa mga ibang lugar na napupuntahan kong community, for example, meron kang DSLR or drone or kung ano mga media para manarap talaga. Parang kinoconfiscate kasi iba binabaril pa yung drone ng mga military forces. Naisip ko, yung pintura kasi na latex lang. Yung spray paint nga na-confiscate kasi akala ng mga military bomba yung spray paint. So yung latex, naisip nila, or naisip ko na lang na latex paint kasi minsan sila sa ating excuse para na makapush through sa isang community is magpipinta lang ako sa backup ng isang pamilya. So, parang gano'n eh. Siguro parang hindi nag-sign talaga yung Curtain Artist Award as an award. Tapos, ayun, parang mas, ngayon, siguro, parang...
Hindi pa rin babago.
Oo, parang tawag ito, mas tanongin din kung ano yung estado. Parang ayaw ko matakot na tanongin din kung ano yung nangyayari ngayon. Mas more on pagtatanong lagi.
And lastly, Eisa.
I think malaki yung responsibilidad sa pagiging invite as a 13 artist award. Para sa akin, malaking opportunity siya na gawing visible yung mga bagay na normative sa society. Example, yung white aspiration, which is sobrang embedded na sa ating kultura at history. At the same time, we are really a product of our context and our social-political, historical roots. And in that sense, pratikang binibiro sa akin yung, actually hindi binibiro eh. Kasi sabihin ako ng magulang ko, OFW pa rin naman. Pratikang wala dito, tapos pagbalik mo, wala ka naman trabaho. So, parang, in a way, it's for me, it's a way to make visible something that I've been doing outside. So my patronage has been, or let's say, ang production ko ay, ang pera ay galing sa labas, katulad ng mga OFW na.
So opportunity for internal visibility dito sa amin.
But at the same time, parang yung mismong subject ng trabaho ko ay ganun din yung, kumbaga, production method na kung paano siya sinusuportahan.
Okay, and with that, we open, and we give a few minutes for, open the floor for your questions, responses. Silvana.
Good evening. I would like to ask a question to can I?
Yes, who would you like to ask? Carlo.
Carlos and Mr.
Carlo Gabuco and Archie Oclos.
And Archie, okay. What puzzled me is this: what you have presented had extremely strong social hurt and violence to society. Now, I'm asking, wouldn't that be much better for you? Yes, you accept the 13 Nasty Award. Would it be better that you made an act of great defiance to say to the state, go to hell. You gave it to me, but you have betrayed the Filipino people.
Yeah, I can go to hell. Yeah, I thought of that actually. Actually, I wasn't here to know where it at. We did this story that we were advised to go out. But for me, it's also, I'm not after really, you said, whatever award or glory. I actually feel uncomfortable receiving the award. But for me, the platform is important. Again, for me, engagement is important right now. I need the opportunity to just engage, and so if ever I'm offered a platform, especially if the state offers it to me, it's the perfect way to parang splinter the thing, to penetrate or insulate yourself, and then just sakang ikalat whatever message or whatever it is na gusto mong ikalabas. So I think that's how my brain works.
Yung sa part naman ko, siguro mas inisip ko na hindi yung sarili ko yung nagsasalita dito sa work na to. Mas inisip ko yung boses ng mga nakararami. Tapos din kasi sa practice sa ginagawa ko yung practice ngayon as an artist, feel ko mas nagawin yung mga immersion na yun yung pansin kong wala masyado nangyari sa artist. So, dahil kapag ka sa immersion, yung sarili mo, parang ano lang siya, ako sa sarili, parang nakikita ko na lang na vehicle ako ng mga taong ito na hindi makapagsalita or walang karapatang makapagsalita. So, now na nagkaroon ng classic, gantong award, as award, hindi ko talaga titingnan as an award, pero inisip ko talaga, okay, gagawin ko ito hindi para sa akin. It's for them. They might as well be the voice of this work na ano yun, sila na yung mas magsalita. Kung merong effects tong ginawa kong artwork from the state itself, might as well, I mean, ewan ko, hindi na ako natakot siguro. Kasi na-experience ko na siya, so bahala na. Pero po kayong masabi kung ano, repercussions ng nangyayari, basta bahala na.
Okay. Quick lang. Also, parang, for me, I think the best way to, kasi if you're trying to address something and parang hold people accountable, especially in the government, better than sa institution that they created. So parang kung sumusumigaw, sumusulang, ano ngayon, I think this is the closest na we could parang reach out or, you know, have them accountable for whatever shit they put us through.
Okay, we have a question from Neil Galoricon.
Parang ano lang, observation lang. So essentially, siyempre yung CCP is part of the superstructure of the state. But when you come into details, for instance, the manner in which, how these people were chosen, about certain artists, after collegial.
Yes.
Kami yung nagana, kami yung judge. Pagkatapos di ba parang masakit din tingnan, bigla sila mag-protest against the award. Na kami, parang truthful kami dun sa ano namin, sa judgment namin. Di ba? Totoo yun, part sila na, ako biktima rin yan, ako ginaging biktima. Pero when you come to realize it, na yung pumili sa'yo, ay kulig,
Yes.
within the art community, parang hirap. Di ba yung mga nag-judge?
So by the way, Neil was a jury, no?
Yes, and Concerned Artists in the Philippines head. Perhaps the question niya is more relevant to the National Artist Awards since it was determined mismo. Kasi somehow, I think the 13 artists, I'm also 13 artist awardee, I associate it more now with this community of artists rather than the president or the state. Somehow, that there is, I wouldn't accept it if it was something that, yes.
But in our case, during the time, medyo euphoric. Kasi after the People Revolution.
So I would say that perhaps we can move to another question para, okay, the next question, okay, nauna actually the woman at the back before Feliz.
Could you pass the mic?
And then last question will be for Feliz because we have another activity. Feliz. Feliz.
Feliz the Feliz. Caballero. Okay. Yes, please. Do you have the mic? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mila Aguilar. I want to ask the old 13 artists. Yeah, because I was in the underground when you were 13 artists, and from the underground, I ran the National United Front Commission, and we had a cultural bureau. And I had a bureau for the artists, but I never really got in touch with the artists personally, with the legal artists. So I am curious now as to how much of an influence the underground had on you artists.
Very much, I guess. It has influenced me. It has influenced me a lot. But as an artist, I was not really involved in any leftist group, although I was very much aware of what they were doing. But I guess I was more concerned with what's happening myself and my reaction to what was going on.
Bila? Hindi ko malaman kung paano ko sisimulan, pero may nangyari sa akin na may isang grupo ng mga nasa underground na kumausap sa akin kasi nagustuhan nila yung mga ginagawa kong trabaho na political cartoons. Paano na yun ang martial law? Ang sabi sa akin, tulungan ko raw sila kung pwede raw akong mag-contribute ang trabaho ko. Ibahin ko yung style ko at huwag kong gamitin ang pangalan ko. Ang sagot ko sa kanila, bakit ko naman gagawin yon? Kung epektibo naman yung trabaho ko, bakit naman kailangan ko itago yung pangalan ko at ibahin ko pa yung style ko? Mas nakakatulong nga yung lantaran, hindi lang nakikita. Yung klase ng trabaho ko, kasi nakatago na mangilan-ilan lang kayo nasa underground ang makakaalam at makakapagkalat. Samantala yung trabaho na ginagawa ko lantaran, hindi naman ako kinakabahan at hindi ako natatakot dahil nasanay na sila sa mga klaseng trabaho ginagawa ko at kilala nila na ako ang gumagawa. Ang hirap talaga bila na gusto mo tumulong pero nakita ko sa puso mo na gagalawin yung paggawa mo ng trabaho. Sana'y naintindihan mo.
Katulad ng sagot ng Globe o Smart sa mga reklamo ng mga kliyente nila, sasabihin ko, I am so sorry for the inconvenience. I will apologize for whoever the comrades were who did that to you. I had nothing to do with it.
May natutunan ako sa mga nasa underground. Marami akong kasama na nasa underground pala. Nalaman ko na lang later na doon pala sila sa underground. Anyway, ang natutunan ko, yung sa pag-subvert ng trabaho, para nga maunawaan ng mga marunong bumasa, then meron silang lingwahe ng visual. So, ayun. Kaya, lately, ang nagawa ko dahil doon sa EJK, yung epiko ng mga dragon. So, yung ginawang allegorical para ma-underground. Pero masubvert yung image, through the images. Yeah. Pero directly, wala akong, hindi ko alam na underground sila eh. Kaya directly.
Among ng CCP at after a while, yung pagbuo mismo ng National Commission on Culture and the Arts. So sa palagay ko dapat maisip din natin na medyo malakas yung engagement ng people's organization sa pagbuo at reorientation ng Sentro Pangkultura. At sana nga ito yung panahon upang laksan pa natin yung ating claim dito sa and foothold sa patuloy na pagbukas ng Cultural Center of the Philippines sa lalong relevant na mga trabaho at mga trabahong nakipag-ugnayan sa everyday issues tulad ng makataong karapatan. Kaya muli siguro ang nakakataba ng puso at nakaka-inspire sa gabing ito ay yung pagtitipon natin ay parang nakikita natin na yung singing natin, ang ating mga tula, mga awitin, mga sayaw na mapanood ngayong gabi ay parang itong isang sulo na siyang hopefully liliwanag at liliyak sa kadiliman. At sana mas malakas pa ang liwanag nito kaysa tala ng Pasko na siya namang nakikita natin sa taas ng mural ni Archie Oclos. At ito yung tamang-tama yung ating celebration ngayong gabi or commemoration ngayong gabi upang mabigyan ding saysay yung ating celebration ng Kapaskuhan. So para sa lahat, isang relevant, meaningful na commemoration ng human rights as well as isang relevant at meaningful na celebration ng Pasko. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat at magandang gabi.
Maraming salamat, Sir Chris Miliado.
Ayan, thank you, Chris, for that wonderful welcome remark.
Yes. May, matanong ko lang. Total, ang usapan natin dito ay human rights. Na-experience mo na ba yung na-violate yung rights mo?
Oo naman. Nag-umpisa ako sa PETA noong 1983 at kasama ko nung nahuli ako. Nandito nga si CB. CB, asan ka na? Nung ayun, nasa PETA ako noong 1980, ano ba yung CB? 85. Nasa transport strike kami noon. Biglang dumating mga pulis, hinabol kami. May mga tranchon, tear gas. Napabagal yung takbo ko kasi nakita ko ng bakyang tumabing na ganon. So ayun, humina ang takbo ko. Nung uminom na kami ng soft drink sabay New Frontier, tumitingin na ganon yung pulis. Nakita ko, Julie Vega. Kasama ko noon, si Nalino Broca. Alam, Julie.
Okay.
Ako millennial kasi yung kasama ko.
Hindi, kilala ko si Julie Vega eh.
Hindi mo kilala si Julie Vega?
Ako, wala yun.
Huwag na nga.
Julie.
Nakakaloka.
Kasi 1985 yung martial law pa yan eh, no? Bagong revolusyon.
Yan.
Parang...
Iya ako sa'yo, Watson.
Nahihiya nga ako kasi hindi ko kilala si Julie Vega.
Oo nga.
Pero narinig ko na yung
May
pangalan.
Cyrus na inabutan mo.
Mas luma.
Kanyang asawa ay kinulin nung isang gabi samantalang sino ba to? Siya pang ang guilty, tago rin sa pangalang Bong Revilla. Seryoso, tama ba yun?
Pero pinapasoli daw ang pera. Hindi ko alam.
Ang alam ko, sabi sa akin ni CJ Sereno, ang hustisya may common sense. May logic. Kasi, paano nangyari yun? Hindi ba? Pinapasoli 124 million. Ibig sabihin kung pinapasoli, naniniwala silang matibay na ebidensya kay Bong Revilla, hindi ba?
Oo.
Pero siya ay acquitted. Pero yung nasa ilalim niya na si Cambe ay guilty. Diyos me, yun.
Binigyan ng sana, pinatawan mo.
Pag ako nagka-boyfriend, alis na lang ako dito. Charot! Joke lang! I love the Philippines.
Hindi ko pa nababasa yung desisyon eh, pero baka kinonsider yung ignorance niya or whatever. Walang criminal intent. Pero huwag na ma-magic kasi yung mga desisyon
Kaya
natin.
nga, di ba? Ang hustisya na walang common sense, may hocus-pocus.
Anyway, balik tayo
dito.
Sa
Alam
human
niyo, hindi mo mangyayari ang gabing ito kung yan ay tinulungan ng maraming institusyon. Isa na nga ang CCP. Pero kailangan din natin pasalamatan ang Commission for Human Rights.
Na nabanggit ko na kanina. Unfortunately, yung dapat magsasalita ay yung
Nagkasakit na siya, hindi niya na kinayakan na kaya ng araw-araw may event.
Kaya yung magre-represent sa kanya to give us his message, let's welcome Miss Marie Madamba to represent the
Napakan po natin si Miss Marie.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat po, Choy at Ray. Pinapaod po ni Chair Gascon ang kanyang taus-pusong pamanhin na hindi na niya kinaya physically to be here. Pero with you naman po siya in spirit. So binigyan niya po ako ng instruction na pakibasa na lang itong kanyang message. So good evening everyone. I am aware that this program started earlier this afternoon with an intergenerational memory project, the 13 artists in a time of dictatorship. This particular activity here now, Artists for Human Rights, is a gathering of the Filipino artist community to make a strong statement to uphold, protect, and defend human rights, freedom, and dignity. The CHR is of course very honored to be partnering with you on these laudable activities, especially in this time of crisis for human rights. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng nag-ambag na mag-organisa para sa araw at gabing ito. Shout out po sa dakila, aktivista at hudyat na matagal nang partner ng CHR, as well as all its artist partners, singers, movie makers, photographers, visual artists. Alam niyo na po kung sino kayo. Special shout out to all our artists, sa mga tagapagpadaloy ng kultura, mga tagapagbandila ng kalinangan, mga madalas na konsyensya ng sambayanan, ang ating mga manggagawang pangkultura at artista ng bayan. Palakpakan niyo po ang inyong mga sarili. This audience, more than myself, is acutely aware, of course, of the long history of active participation of artists, writers, and cultural workers in our nation's long struggle for freedom and democracy. Let me mention very quickly. Our pre-Spanish ancestors were sophisticated craftspersons and artistic creators whose artifacts reveal an advanced culture of community and solidarity. Our babaylanes were priestesses and our early cultural leaders in all senses of the word. During the Spanish colonization, many of our peasants and even so-called millenarian movements who became the base of popular revolts against Spain appropriated the cultural products of their time, even using religious rituals and iconography to inspire resistance and revolution. Journalists like Plaridel, Lopez Haina, and Ponce, and artists like Juan Luna, who painted 400 masterpieces, were the backbone of the propaganda movement, making the case for independence while at the same time introducing to the world the advanced cultures of the Filipino race. Rizal was a novelist, among others. Bonifacio was not only a poet and songwriter, but also a part-time theater actor in Moro-Moro plays. His wife's second husband, Julio Napil, was a well-known composer and musician. Jacinto wrote poetry. Tandang Sora was a well-known singer. General Luna was a guitarist who played the bandurria. Early feminist Leona Florentino was a poet and playwright. Sakay was a tailor, a maker of calesas, and a stage actor. Zarzuelas, kundimans, and other indigenous literary forms were sharp weapons of social analysis and invitations to social activism during the American period. As we were imagining a nation truly independent, we built our icons with the help of our sculptors and artists. The Rizal and Bonifacio monuments, the publication and popularization of the rich trove of creative work of our heroes and martyrs. Our indigenous communities became source and inspiration to us, searching for vernacular cultures which have been buried under foreign or elite sociocultural dominance. Protest songs and literature have a long history dating back to the colonial era, to the Japanese invasion and war years, and into the post-war era when our workers and peasants became the sharp end of social critique against the dehumanizing elite domination of our economy. This rich tradition, of course, came to a head when a kleptocratic dictatorship grabbed power in 1972 and plunged our country into one of its darkest ages. The people, of course, fought back using the rich traditions of social realist art, political protest, and cultural resistance, all of which exploded into a plethora of artistic and cultural expression, which made us think, made us angry, made us laugh, made us resist, and ultimately made us revolt. Not only in the confines of Imelda's true, good, and beautiful edifices like this one, which the people eventually appropriated, but cultural resistance spread in many spaces. In the academe, in a lightly regarded mosquito press, in mosques and churches, and even, but more importantly, in far-flung communities from north to south. From the Igorots struggling against a dam, to the peasants waging agrarian reform, an agrarian revolution, to the workers staring down goons and Metrocom agents in picket lines, and in schools nationwide where our best and brightest were waking up to the power of a people uniting against tyranny. Artists were our truth tellers in the face of the dictatorship's lies and propaganda and today's fake news. Artists were the soul of the popular revolts that would culminate in EDSA and communicate the values and principles of our struggle. Artists were our conscience. you still are. I myself grew up in this martial law milieu. I was exposed to and was, in a sense, reared by some of the best cultural works of our generation. The writings and poetry of Lumbera, Lacaba, and Barrios. The films of Broca, Bernal, and De Leon. The music of Santiago and Bartolome, of Asin, Inanglaya, and Patatan. The comics of Marcelo, and the art of Doloricon Fernandez, as well as of many street artists painting unbelievable murals for our almost daily protests. In many ways, my career as a youth leader who became a social activist and eventually a public servant was wind in the people's cultural struggles. The art during repression was part of the soundtrack and backdrop of my life. And so, I am witness to the power of culture in our country's history and emancipations. So how do human rights fit in then? Our struggle for freedom, democracy, and yes, humanity is the struggle for human rights. Human rights are based on the belief that all persons have inalienable dignity, and that is the foundation of culture. That humans are not here just to exist, but to live life to the fullest, to create a better life for ourselves and the people we love. So in many ways, artists and cultural workers are the beacons of human rights everywhere. Sorry. This 2018, we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on December 10. The UDHR, as the most translated document in the world, it has been translated more than 500 languages worldwide, is the world's best kept open secret. Even as it has been translated widely in language, it has not been so translated so much in the real world, in real life situations where human rights are violated every day. If I may, here is probably my most important message to you today. Our present human rights crisis also appears to be a cultural crisis. We are in a worldwide crisis, retreat of liberalism, rise of populist authoritarianism, and recession of democracy. And the narrative of individual rights of all is being existed
and values the dignity, rights, and freedoms of the people. Again, welcome to AHRT and maraming salamat.
Ganda. Hindi talaga pwedeng lahat tayo artista lang. Dapat meron ding manager. At yan ho ang role ni Lenny. Amazing woman. Palakpakan nga ho natin siya ulit. As in, talagang ho yung natutulog.
Ito ang unang ilalatag para maipagtagumpay ang malawakang pagyurak sa karapatang pantao. Ang pagpuksa sa katotohanan. Noong panahon ng diktadura ni Marcos, ang paraan ng pagpuksa sa katotohanan ay simpleng pagbabawal na maglahad ng totoo. Kinakalburo ang katotohanan ng kahirapan, binubusalan ng katotohanang inihahayag ng media at sining, at kung hindi mapatahimik ay kinukulong, tinotorture o pinapatay ang sinumang nagpapahalaga sa katotohanan. Ang lahat ng uri ng karahasan at walang habas na pagyurak sa karapatang pantao ay inilatag sa pundasyong ito. Puksain ang katotohanan. Huwag itong hayaang mamutawi sa bibig, panulat at kung maaari sa isipan at puso ng mamamayan. Noon yon. Ngayon, may panibagong paraan ng pagpuksa sa katotohanan bukod sa paraang pinalawak ng rehimeng Marcos. Una ko itong napansin noong 2009 nang makausap ko si Rodolfo Jun Losada Jr. na siyang saksi sa iskandalo ng korupsyon sa National Broadband Network o NBN-ZTE deal. Sa isang pag-uusap nila ng isang kardinal, na nooy nakikilalang suportado ng dating Presidente Gloria Arroyo, tila hinihikayat si June Losada na maghinay-hinay sa pagiging whistleblower niya sa naturang eskandalo. Ang kwento ni June, siya mismo ay natigilan nang sabihin sa kanya ng kardinal na, alam mo kasi, truth and lies, they are the same. Kahit ako natigalgal sa narinig ko, paano tayo umabot sa ganitong uri ng retorika? Nagdaan ang mga taon at eto tayo ngayon. Saksi tayong lahat sa sinabi ng kardinal na yon. Hindi na lamang siya retorika, isa na siyang government policy. Isang polisiyang pupuksa sa katotohanan. Ito ang mga hakbang sa pagpuksa sa katotohanan. Una, lituhin ang mamamayan tungkol sa halaga nito. Alin nga ba ang totoo at alin ang hindi? Dito naging mahalaga ang mga kampon ng fake news, ng internet trolls. Lituhin ng mga tao hanggang sa mapaniwala sila na wala palang pagkakaiba ang totoo sa kasinungalingan, sa anyo nito't bihis, sa pananalita at retorika. Lalo ngayon sa panahon ng social media at internet kung saan madali nang ma-Google ang kahit anong uri ng impormasyon at kaalaman. Madali nang balasahin ang iba't ibang sangkap ng kaalamang ito para magluto ng kasinungalingan. Wala halos pinag-iba sa pagdugtong ng katawan ng tao at isda sa Photoshop para patunayang totoong may mga sirena. Ikalawa, baluktutin ang katwiran. Maraming paraan para hindi kumatig sa katwiran ng mamamayan. Isa rito ay mag-imbento ng krisis. Krisis sa droga halimbawa. I-exaggerate ang tindi ng problema. Hindi na mahirap gawin yan. Kailangan lamang ay tumukoy ng problema at palalain ito ng higit sa totoo. Alam naman nating mas pinaniniwalaan ang isang kasinungalingang may bahid ng katotohanan. Noong 2016, bago mag-eleksyon, wala halos sa lahat ng plataforma ng mga kumandidato sa pagkapresidente ang isyu ng droga bilang pangunahing problema ng bansa. Tanging si Duterte lamang ang may matinding pagdanasang puksain ang para sa kanya'y malala ng krisis. Pinalobo niya ang problema sa antas na maaaring matakot ang ordinaryong mamamayan. At iyon ang ikatlong paraan. Gamitin ang baluktot na katwirang ito para magtanim ng takot at taranta. Isang uri ng pangamba na magpapaniwala sa mamayan na ang sanhi ng takot na ito'y hindi malulutas ng kahit na sino kundi ng gobyernong pamumunuan niya. Sa makatwid, hiningi ng gobyernong ito ang bulag na pagtitiwala at pagtalima sa pangakong sila na ang bahalang lumutas ng krisis na sila rin naman ang lumikha. At alam naman natin, kapag ang pangamba ay pinaniwalaan, lahat ng karapatan mo ay isusuko mo para lang sa seguridad na mayroong magaganap na pagbabago, pati na ang karapatan mong mag-isip. Ikaapat, tumukoy ng isang sektor sa lipunan at tanggalan ito ng pagkatao bilang ugat ng ating mga problema sa buhay. Ipamukha na ang sektor na ito ay walang pakinabang, makahayop, zombie, at dahil ganun nga'y hindi kailangang pagsisihan ng pagpatay sa kanila. Mabilis ito at sistematiko, pero siguruhin ang pagtukoy sa sektor na ito ay hindi abot ang makapangyarihang uri sa lipunan. Hindi dapat kumawala sa labas ng uri ng mga etsapuera. Hindi pwedeng umabot sa mga taong nag-aambag sa patuloy na pag-ugong ng ating ekonomiya. Oo, dahil alagad ng simbahan, alagad ng sining, kritiko ng administrasyon, lumad, magsasaka, manggagawa, dukha. Iisa na lamang ang kanilang habas. Lahat sila'y tinanggalan ng pagkatao at pinagmukhang demonyo, walang pakinabang, binastos at inulan ng pagmumura na siyang salamin ng sarili nilang kahayupan. Sa isang alagad ng
nung panahon ni GMA, nasabi nga na truth is the same as lies. Na doon nagsisimula talaga yung pagwasak ng katotohanan, doon nagsisimula yung panlilinlang, pagmanipulate sa pag-iisip ng mamamayan. Ang naaalala ko, nung nag-umpisa itong administrasyon ito, ni-research ko kung ilan ba talaga yung drug addict eh. Kasi, ayun nga, may problema tayo sa drugs, pero crisis ba ito na yung nagsa-throw lang ng numbers na 4 million, 3 million, di mo na nga alam eh. Kasi syempre, yung pulisiya, nakabase dapat dun sa datos. Ang alam ko, 1.8 million eh. So, may problema pero in-exaggerate at yun nga, nag-identify nung sektor na pwedeng i-marginalize at pwedeng ipatanggalan ng karapatan. Kaya maraming salamat po. Again, we are fortunate tonight that we have artists speaking who have agreed to share messages of solidarity for this human rights cause. Before I call on the next speaker, gusto ko lang po i-remind kayo na meron po tayong hashtags. If you wish to share this event on social media, yung hashtag po natin, hashtag Artists for Human Rights and hashtag AHRFest.ph. I think kanina nasabi rin yung hashtag Stop the Attacks. Okay, so for our next speaker now, I would like to call on from the organization Baygani, Miss Karen Tanyada.
Magandang gabi po sa lahat. Malaking karangalan para sa amin sa Baygani na makiisa sa inyo ngayong gabi. Sa mga alagad ng sining at sa lahat na naninindigan para sa mga karapatan sa aming mga lodi. Ano ba ang Baygani? Ito ay isang bago at maliit na grupo, maliit pa lamang. Pero binuo kami dahil sa tawag ng panahon na hindi lamang yung sobrang pagbabastos sa mga kababaihan at paglalapastangan sa dignidad ng kababaihan sa mga salita, kundi sa issue rin talaga ng extrajudicial killing na kahit na medyo kakaunting porsyento ang mga kababaihan na sila ang direktang biktima, nakita natin na ang mga byuda, ang mga ina, ang pamilya ng kung 27,000 o higit pang biktima nito ay kasama rin sa biktima ng EJK. Kaya't binuo po ang Baygani bilang kaisahan ng mga kababaihan para labanan ang EJK. Nagkakaisa kami, mga kababaihan, sa pagdadalamhati. Nagkakaisa sa pagprotesta, sa paghahanap ng paraan na maibangon muli yung mga pamilya, sa paghanap ng katarungan at ng paghilom. Napakakonti pa lang ng aming nagagawa para matulungan ng mga kababaihang ito. Isang paraan po tulad ng ginagawa na family camp ay para magsama ang mga nanay at mga bata sa isang lugar at para makapagkwentuhan, magkasama-sama at magkaroon ng solidarity sila. Sinusubukan din na i-connecta sila sa mga serbisyo. May ginagawa na kaunting mga research at advokasya. Pero alam namin na napakaliit at napakamahina pa yung ating puwersa at ang nagagawa. Sinusubukan na magkaroon ng lakas ng loob at empowerment yung mga kababaihan. Pero madalas nga nauuwi, katulad ng nangyari nitong mga nakaraang buwan, nasamahan lang yung nanay dahil yung anak, yung asawa kasi ay na EJK nung maaga, July pa lamang, nung 2016. Yung 14-year-old na anak ay nagka-leukemia. At umanaw na nga. Kaya ang gawain na lang namin ay makasama sa burol. Nitong linggo lamang ay yung isa sa mga nanay ay kailangan mangulit kami dahil higit 2 araw na ay nakaupo sa wheelchair sa emergency room dahil hindi makahanap ng kama pero medyo acute na yung kanyang karamdaman. So ito po yung kailangan harapin ng marami sa ating mga pamilya kung yung ilan na natutulungan natin, isipin natin na libo-libo yung nasa ganyang sitwasyon. Kaya't minsan, sa pag-uusap nga sa aming Viber, ay parang ang pakiramdam namin ay parang sinampal tayo ng gobyerno. Hindi lang sinampal ng gobyerno, pero parang sinampal din kung minsan ng lipunan. Dahil bakit sinusuportahan pa rin nila o bakit tahimik pa rin sila. At sa ganitong panahon, dito po na lalo naming gustong magpasalamat para sa lahat ng naninindigan, lalo na yung mga artists. Dahil tinutulungan nyo kami na sinasalamin ang sitwasyon, sinasalamin ang katotohanan. Kung minsan ay iniisip ay, totoo ba ito o parang guni-guni lang natin itong pangyayari, masamang bangungot na halos hindi natin mapaniwalaan. Malaking tulong po ang gawain ng mga artists sa paglabas din kahit sa pagbuhos ng mga luha, pero minsan din sa pagtulong na makatawa naman paminsan-minsan, at higit sa lahat sa pagbigay ng pag-asa, na pwede muli bumangon at lumaban pa. So sa inyo, maraming salamat po. Patuloy tayong magsama at sama-sama nating salubungin ang liwanag. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Karen Tanyada, sa inyo pong solidarity message. Yung sunod po na magsasalita, isang filmmaker. Actually, meron akong experience na magkasama kami na nagkaroon ng parang security threat eh. Ewan ko kung babanggitin niya yun. Medyo mapanganib nga talaga yung nangyayari ngayon, pati sa mga artists, pati sa mga human rights defenders. Tinatawag ko mula sa Concerned Artists of the Philippines, si Mr. J.L. Burgos.
Magandang gabi po. Hindi ko kayo makita, masyadong maliwanag. Bago ako magsimula, nais ko sanang magbigay pugay sa isang biktima ng tukhang. Isa po siyang nanay. Nandito po siya. Palakpakan po natin si Nanay Marisa. Noong unang bahagi ng 1983, nagkaroon ng Executive Order 868, binabato ni Pangulong Marcos, ni dating Pangulong Marcos. At ang executive order na to ay nagbigay ng lalong lakas sa Board of Censors. Pagkababa ng executive order na to, maraming pagtutol ang naganap. At dahil maraming pagtutol ang naganap, dito nabuo yung Free the Artist campaign. Alam ko may mga ilan pang nandito na bahagi ng Free the Artist campaign. Kinalaunan, after ng pagbaba na yon ay hinuli ang ilang mga artista at manunulat ng bayan. Pero bago nito, may mga ilang mamamahayag ng hinuli sa paglalabas ng katotohanan sa kanilang mga dyaryo. Ang tatay ko po ay isa sa nahuli. Pagkatapos nito, dahil nga may mga nahuli ng ilang mga media personalities, journalists, nagkaroon pa yung Free the Artist campaign at nadagdagan pa ng Free the Media. Free the Artist, Free the Media. At ito ang naging tungtungan ng Concerned Artists of the Philippines para mabuo. Kung tama ang aking alaala, dito mismo sa CCP, sa Cultural Center of the Philippines, naglantad ang mga ilang artista ng bayan ng pagtutol sa pagkitil sa malayang pamamahayag, pag-censor sa kanilang mga pelikula, at sa kabuuan ay ang maraming paglabag sa karapatang pantao. Dito mismo sa CCP, 35 years ago, nangyari ito. At nakakalungkot na hanggang sa kasalukuyan, ang mga pinaglalaban ng mga artista ng bayan noong panahon noon ay kasalukuyan natin pinaglalaban sa ngayon. Nakakalungkot Pero ano bang pwede nating gawin? Ano ba ang maaari nating gawin? Ano ang pwede nating gawin sa ngayon? Habang binabalot, kamakailan binansagang recruiter na NPA ang mga pelikulang Pilipino, ang mga pelikulang tumatalakay sa batas militar. Dito nabuo yung art. Nagkaroon kami ng isang statement para tuligsain ang pagbabansag ng mga pelikulang ito bilang recruiter ng NPA. Binanggit kanina na ako ay mismo ay pinuntahan ng mga militar, pinaghihinala ang militar sa aking screening. Dalawa sa kasamahan namin sa Concerned Artists of the Philippines ay pinuntahan mismo sa bahay ng mga pinaghihinala ang mga militar. Ang isa ron ay si RB Barbona. Si RB Barbona ay ang direktor ng Tupog Imatoy. Siya ang best director ng FAMAS 2018. Siya ang best director ng Gawad Urian 2018. Habang binabalot tayo ng kadiliman, ano bang pwede natin gawin? Iisa lang naman ang masasabi ko, kailangan natin magkaisa, kailangan natin manindigan. Nais ko lang balikan yung sinabi ni Lino Broca na bago tayo maging artista, tayo ay isang mamamayang Pilipino. Ang struggle ng isang artista ay struggle ng mga manggagawa at magsasaka. Hindi tayo nahihiwalay doon dahil tayo ay Pilipino at tayo ay isang mamamayan ng Pilipinas. Kaya inaanyayahan ko ang mga aking kapwa-artista na manindigan at magkaisa. Itigil ang pag-atake sa mga artista, itigil ang atake sa mamamayang Pilipino.
Susunod ko pong tatawagan ay pinarangalan ngayong taong itong 2018. Isa siya sa 13 Artists Awardee. Isa pong visual artist. Palakpakan po natin si Mr. Carlo Gabuco.
Magandang gabi sa lahat ng dumalo. Salamat din sa nag-imbita. And kung sino man sa inyo na hindi pa nakakita ng aming exhibition, ongoing siya hanggang January 20. So andito ako para magsalita in behalf of the 13 artists. When I was starting as an artist, I was taught that as artists, we should be critical. We should ask questions. We should constantly produce work that provokes. Never has this idea been more needed as it is today. 2.5 years ago, I decided to put down the brush and become a full-time photographer. It took me many years to really convince myself that I can do this. That I can be a photographer and tell other people's stories. To quote the great Jim Nactway, a war photographer, in order to convince other people, I first have to convince myself. So I did. The past 2 years, I've seen things that I have never thought I'd see in my entire lifetime. Many of them horrific, brutal even. It quickly changed me, it formed me. I cannot say it has made me a better person, but it clearly showed me where I should stand in the midst of everything that has been happening. From then on, I have been a witness. The photographs that I've shown in my exhibitions are testimonies, not of mine, but of all the people that I've come across with. The people who led me to their lives, in their homes, and experience, or just take even just a glimpse of their daily lives and the neglect and the brutality and the injustice that they experience every day. These photographs are their stories. I have learned that we can never really change the world. The least we could do is add up to the discussion, cut through the noise, using our work as tools to engage and protest any form of injustice. Constantly look for ways to tell the narrative of our time. Let us continue to be vigilant, critical, and aware of any social injustice. We should stand up together. So I urge my fellow artists and storytellers that are here tonight to continue telling the narratives of our time. In behalf of the 13 artist awardees, we stand with all of you and all the human rights defenders against the brutality and the social injustice. And let us all fight and defend the right to live, our right to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Salamat, Carlo. Okay pa ba kayo o pa-intense?
Okay pa tayo?
Ha? Okay pa kayo? Gising pa kayo? Yes! Dapat gising kayo kasi pag nakakita ko ng art, lagi kong naiisip, gusto kong makita yung gumawa.
Oo.
Ikaw ba ang nangyayari sa iyo yun? Pag meron ko nakita magandang art, sino kaya ang gumawa nito? Ano kaya itsura niya?
Siyempre, oo. Kasi, paano niya naisip? Ano ba yung dumabo sa kanyang utak yung ginagawa niya?
Kaya nga, itong nasa likod, ano kaya itsura ng gumawa niyan? Gusto niyo magpakita kung sino gumawa ng artwork sa likod? Di ba? Ako gusto ko siyang makita kasi nung una akong tumayo dito, actually nangilabot ako kasi walang tao noon, kami lang nila Ed, pagpunta namin dito ko, OMG. Diba? 20,000 strokes ginawa niya.
Gano'n kaya katagal ginawa?
Oo. Anyways, kilalanin natin siya. Anong mukha ng taong gumawa ng ganito ka-powerful na artwork?
Yes.
So, ito na. This is it. The time to see the face of Mr. Archie Oclos.
Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Siguro mag-iwan lang ako ng maikling mensahe tungkol dito sa gawa ko. Para sa mga taong walang pagkakakilanlan, walang mukha, walang pangalan, walang edad at kasarian, nilagdaan ng numero sa bawat ulo, hinusgahang makasalanan, kriminal, rebelde at terorista, tinanggalan ng mga karapatan. Dito sa lupang hinirang, kasalanan daw maging mahirap, kasalanan daw maging magsasaka at katutubo. Kasalanan daw alagaan at protektahan ang lupa at kalikasan. Kasalanan daw maging kritikal at mapanuri. Dito sa lupang hinirang, walang pagpapahalaga sa bawat buhay. May halaga lang tayo tuwing eleksyon. Ang mamatay ng dahil sa iyo.
Artista ng bayan!
Ngayon ay lumalaban!
Ngayon ay lumalaban!
Artista ng bayan!
Yes. Mabuhay ka, Archie Oclos.
Mabuhay.
Mabuhay.
Okay.
Ngayon naman, ang susunod naming ipapakilala, dito ako nag-umpisa bilang artista sa grupong ito. At I'm very proud because if not for this company, I will not be who I am now as an artist. Siguro kung artista man ako, kung hindi ako dito nag-umpisa, baka para lang akong si Lea Navarro. Charot! Joke lang! Diba? Pero at least marami akong pera dahil sa grupong to. Wala naman akong masyadong kinikita. Char! Pero I may not be alive with happiness, but I am alive with meaning. Oh! Ayaw niyo ba yun? Palakpakan naman dyan! Do you want happiness or meaning?
Both.
Money or meaning? Both. Tama. Itong makabatang ito. Very good. So, ngayon?
Okay, ako na mag-welcome.
Ikaw na.
Okay. So, i-welcome po natin ang President ng Philippine Educational Theater Association, si Ms. CB
Garucho.
Naririto po ang PETA ngayong gabi para suportahan itong importanteng event na to, Artists for Human Rights, at para makiisa sa lahat ng artista at mga cultural workers na naniniwalang dapat itaguyod ang human rights. Ang PETA po ay 51 years old na. Pero nung 5 years old ang kumpanya namin, idineklara po ang martial law 1972.
Artista ng bayan!
anak ng PETA. Grabe. Anak ka ng PETA. Ako rin, anak din ako ng PETA. And I'm proud. Congratulations sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat. Isang magandang masigabong palakpakan para sa mga taga-PETA. Mabuhay kayo. Mabuhay ang sining na hindi carpet friendly. Diba? Anyways, napakaganda pagkatapos ng pagtatanghal na yon. I think napakagandang mangumbida para sa isang malaking mobilization on human rights dahil itong coming Monday, December 10. Look, 8 pa lang ngayon, di ba? 10.
Ay, 10, no, Monday.
10 Monday. Marcha ng mamamayan para sa karapatang pantao. Human Rights Day Public Action of the United People's March for Human Rights or Marcha ng Mamamayan para sa Karapatang Pantao, which is a series of events, programs spanning locations from Welcome Rotonda, where the human rights community shall be massing up, to Bustillos Church, where the bishop will preside over a human rights mass. Similar to the United People's SONA last July and the United People's Action last September, we shall be converging and joining forces with other big human rights defense and anti-dictatorship formations in the Philippines. Conduct a mass up at Para and partner communities human rights caravan 7 a.m. to 7:30, Department of Agrarian Reform. DAR Caravan Send-Off and Solidarity for Sicogon Farmers Program 7:30 to 8 a.m. Tapos transit from DAR to Plaza Miranda, mass up of allied social movements 8 to 9:30 in the morning. Plaza Miranda program next, I Defend with allied forces, social movements 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then march to Bonifacio Shrine 10 a.m. to 10:30. Then convergence and joint program with other formations at Bonifacio Shrine, 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon. Joint march from Bonifacio Shrine to Mendiola, 12 noon to 12:30. And then joint program at Mendiola, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. March to Bustillos Church, 1:30 to 2. Bishop Human Rights Mass at Bustillos Church, 2 to 3 o'clock. Ang Marcha ng Mamamayan para sa Karapatang Pantao or United People's March for Human Rights. Okay, so sana po nandun tayo.
Pagkatapos siya, kung di pa sila pagod,
Hindi pa kayo pagod?
Merong tugtugan sa CHR ng 6
Yes, launching ng bagong album ng Buklod. Siyempre, pag pagod ka na, kailangan mag-relax ka with music. So,
tutugtog rin kami doon.
Tutugtog din kayo.
Kaya nag-pre-promote ko rin.
Okay. So, itong susunod natin ipapakilala, sobra ko tong idol.
Idol talaga to. Yung una kong nakita yung mga images niya, kakaiba.
Oo. In fact, meron kaming ginagawang play sa Wanna Change Advocacy, Tao Po. It's a play about EJK at ang unang-unang character sa play na yan ay hango sa kanyang tunay na storya.
Hindi yan yung nag-zumba? O yun na yung
Hindi siya marunong mag-zumba.
Kasi first time ko napanood yun, May, at gusto ko lang sabihin, hindi ako naka-react noong napanood kita. Doon, ginawa mo yung isang excerpt ng Tao Po. Napakaganda.
Pero ito, yung unang character ito is about a photojournalist, kung paano, kung una, hanap buhay lang, hanggang sa kinailangan niyang mag-resign. But funny how, siya yung, alam niyo siguro yun, yung PETA, yung nakaabot ng New York Times. At ngayon, paikot-ikot siya sa buong mundo, dala-dala ang kanyang, this is the power of his personal narrative. Amazing what his photos.
Parang sakto yung imahe doon sa...
Nung isang araw lang nagpalabas ako sa Ateneo ng play na ito at pinakita ko na naman yung parting yun ng Tao Po, yung kanyang storya. And talaga namang yung mga litrato nakuha niya, ang talagang walang tigil yung mga tao sa pagluha dahil sa napakalakas ng dating ng kanyang mga nakuhang mga litrato.
At syempre yung ginagawa rin niya, it's not without danger itong kanyang gawain.
Correct. So anyways, without further ado,
yes, we would like to call to give a solidarity message to Mr. Rafi Lerma.
Good evening. Basahin ko na lang kasi photos. You know, so, thank you sa invitation. And una sa lahat, nakikisa kami sa lahat ng narito na nagtataguyod at nagtatanggol ng karapatan-pantao at dignidad ng bawat isa. Asahan ninyo na tuloy-tuloy kaming photojournalist sa pagdokumento ng kasulukuyang realidad ng ating. Ngunit, hindi rin kailangan ng isang henyo para matuklasan na ang pang-abuso sa karapatang pantao nitong nakaraang 2 taon ay pawang mali. Bilang mamamayag, hindi tayo pwedeng manahimik na lamang. Hindi tayo pwedeng sumunod o sumang-ayon na lamang. Bilang mamamayag, obligasyon nating ilabas ang katotohanan at hamunin ang pamahalaan na managot sa kanilang mga pagkukulang. Sa pagtatapos, nakikiramay kami sa lahat ng namatayan sa gera kontra illegal na droga. Sa mga pamilya, narito kami, tayo, para kayo'y damayan sa pagharap ng hustisya.
I wrote na when at the time na parang binubugbog na sila masyado yung mga ating mga nasa media when the truth is under siege and the press is pinned down by the state, the arts become our second line of defense. Kaya yung mga artista, mga alagad na sining, kasi napaka-powerful ng work natin Pwede nilang i-shoot down yung sinasabing truth na inilalabas ng mga media platforms natin, no? Kasi words rin yung gagamitin nila para medyo i-twist ng konti. Pero alam mo naman natin itong mga trolls na ito ay mga tamad rin. At hindi sila gagawa ng something that will take so much effort. Kasi sinasabi nga natin parang automatic na lang ito Kaya yung nangyayari dito is that art forms are very powerful medium that are at least to a certain degree resistance to revisionism and fakery. And ang reputasyon ng isang artist ay ang kanyang sinasabi nating shield against these forces that would try to bring down those words or messages that we are trying to give. And lastly, I leave you with this last note that I wrote one evening before I went to this rally nung kay Cian de los Santos. And it was a form of solidarity message to our fellow artists. Artists are generally solitary creatures who prefer the comfort of their studios, desks, quietly toiling at their works. But once you disturb the peace of their environment, the source of their nourishment, threaten the lives of their loved ones, the source of their inspiration, they will move and make the streets as their canvas, as what we see here. They will sing songs from the mouth of the voiceless. They will dance the rage and passion of resistance, scratch words of truth and defiance onto the walls that divide the nation. Once angered, pained, and wounded, they will bleed masterpieces more powerful than the monuments of tyrants. And they will not stop until they have painted their final stroke of dissent, hummed the last note of solidarity, choreographed their climactic movement with the people, and have penned the last line of their oath of deliverance and justice. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang mga alagad na sining.
Salamat, Tatoy. Grabe, iba talaga pag mga artista ang nagsasalita, busog na busog ang ating puso, ang ating diwa, ang gaganda ng kanilang mga iniiwanan sa ating mga salita.
Napakalalim ng reflection.
Oo. Ang mga Pochoy, it is very important to note that Toym is part of Hudyat.
Yes.
At ang grupong Hudyat, yan ang grupo ng mga artists, sa totoo lang, na as early as the first part of 2017, they've banded themselves together to put out artworks and umiikot sila sa Pilipinas and napaka-strong nung ginawa nila na yon. And Toym is part of that. And with Toym, here with us also is Miss Edna Aquino. Palakpakan po natin sila. Kasi si Edna, tinan mo naman niya. Tayo ka Edna para makita nila na aktivista. Anong taon ka? Ilang dekada ng aktivista si Edna? Bukingin na. Siya talaga, she proudly calls herself the Lola Aktivista. So sa mga proud millennials. We should be honored to have Edna Aquino in our midst.
Hello po, Miss.
Mabuhay ka, Edna.
Mabuhay.
Okay. So,
Okay,
ngayon.
maraming salamat po diyan at yung sunod natin na magsasalita, although wala siyang ganito.
Ay, naku, ano to, rockstar.
Yes.
Rockstar. Malapit tayo mag-ending na, meron tayong banda mamaya, kaya huwag kayong naalis kung ayaw nyo masaktan.
Pero bago ko pala i-introduce yung video, yung magsasalita, gusto ko lang i-remind sa lahat, no, itong Artists for Human Rights, hindi lang to nangyayari ngayon dito, across the nation ito. Currently, merong simultaneous na artist gathering sa Iloilo, at the Cinematheque Center, at sa Davao City.
Wow!
Sa Swazo Bar.
Where the dragon
yes, the dragon's there. Okay. So, yung sunod nating magsasalita, although wala siya dito, isang national artist for
Bansang alagad ng singing for visual
arts. Panoorin natin, sikat na sikat, si Mr. Mr. Ben Cabrera.
Roll video.
I didn't change. I'm going to haircut.
Congratulations to the organizers of Artists for Human Rights for encouraging artists and journalists to join forces in an effort to protect fundamental freedoms. Although I cannot be present today, know that I am with you on your stand for human rights, especially our freedom of expressions as artists. In a free and democratic society, all artists should be unrestrained in the making of their art. We should be free to decide what we will create and how we will create it. The purpose of making art is to express who we are. We need the freedom to offend without fear. Together, we must fight suppression and sustain our social and political rights. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Mabuhay tayong mga artista ng bayan.
Mabuhay!
Mabuhay. The freedom to offend. Tandaan nyo, ha? Huwag nyo kakalimutin yan.
Without fear.
Freedom to offend without fear. Let us offend Duterte. Will you offend Duterte? Yes, don't be shy, ha? Don't shy. Just
Don't shy.
Anyways, Pochoy, we will not leave the last few words with an artist.
Yes.
Ang susunod po nating tatawagan ay hindi artista. Pero ang kanyang naratibo ay ibabahagi niya sa atin. Siya po ay pamilya, survivor ng EJK. Pakinggan po natin siya. Tinatawagan po namin sa puntong ito si Marisa Lazaro.
Magandang gabi po. Ako po si Marisa ng Rise Up. Ito po yung aking anak. 20 years old po siya nung pinatay nung August 5, 2017 sa Marilao, Bulacan po, sa likod ng Divine Mercy. Ang alam ko lang po, may pinuntahan lang po sila magkakaibigan. Yung dadalawin lang po nila dahil death anniversary ng isang kaibigan niya. Tapos nung gabi ng Sabado, hindi na po siya umuwi. Linggo, may dumating sa akin na balita na sabi, nasa morgue na daw yung anak ko. Ang alam ko nun, nasa birthday lang siya ng papa ng girlfriend niya. Hindi ako makapaniwala, bakit patay? Anong nangyari? Nung araw na nalaman ko yon, talagang parang huminto ang mundo ko. Hindi ako makagalaw, hindi ako makaiyak. Hanggang sa, yung sinabi ko, saan? Nung pinuntahan ko siya, nakita ko sa morgue. Habang daan, nagdadasal ako na sana hindi yun yung anak ko. Pero nung nakita ko na siya sa morgue, na siya talaga, yung iyak pa rin, yung luha, ayaw lumabas sa mga mata ko. Ang sakit-sakit. Sabi ko, bakit siya pinatay? Wala talaga. Puro tanong ang lumalabas sa bunganga ko, sa bibig ko. Nung may nakausap ako, ang sabi daw ng hold up at notorious drug addict yung anak ko. Nagtataka ako, sabi ko ganun, Kinausap ko yung babae. Sabi ko, anong nalalaman mo dyan sa pagkamatay? 4 po silang magkakaibigan na pinatay. Nung kinausap ko yung babae, sabi niya, nakita ko lang po yan sa post ng FB ng Marilao Police. Pinakita niya sa akin na yun nga ang lumabas, hold-upper daw. Nakuha ko yung bangkay ng anak ko hanggang sa naiuwi ko, na magulo pa rin ang isip ko. Nagtatanong ako dahil bakit yun ang naging balita sa anak ko, dahil yung anak ko simpleng bata lang po siya, yung anak ko, pangarap niya maging pulis. Dahil sa hirap, solo parent po ako hindi ko siya mapag-aral. Pinlano ko pong mag-abroad pero hindi rin po ako natuloy. Kaya yung pagpupulis niya, sabi ko maghintay ka lang, kapag nakaalis ako, magiging pulis ka. Hindi ko inisip na yung pangarap niya maging pulis, pulis pala ang papatay sa kanya. Habang nilalakad ko yung death certificate ng anak ko, kinausap ako ng pulis na may tatanong daw siya sa akin. Ako ang nagtanong sa pulis. Sabi ko, bakit yung pinatay yung anak ko? Hindi yan hold-upper at hindi yan nagda-drugs. Sabi ko, na-drug test niyo po ba yan? Sabi niya, paano madadrug test? Patay na. Sabi ko, bakit niyo po nasabing adik yung anak ko kung hindi niyo na-drug test? Kitang-kita niyo naman po yung katawan ng anak ko. Wala po sa itsura niya ang nagda-drugs. Kahit po pumunta kayo sa lugar namin, wala pong record sa barangay yan. Sabi kong ganon. Tapos, pati yung pangalan na sinasabi nila sa anak ko, ibang pangalan. Na ang sabi nila, may nakuha daw silang ID sa bag ng anak ko. Nung hinihingi ko yung ID na nakuha nila, wala silang maibigay sa akin na ID. At ang sinabi lang nila sa akin, nadama yung anak mo. At ang sabi pa, makipagtulungan daw ako sa kanila para matulungan nila ako. Tinanong ko sila, anong tulong ang maibibigay nyo sa akin? Patay na yung anak ko. Mabubuhay niyo pa ba yan? Sabi ko. Tapos hanggang sa ang kwento nila, yung anak ko daw sa checkpoint, nila, tumakbo daw yung anak ko nung hinabol nila, nagpapatok ng baril. Sabi ko, wala pong baril yan. Sabi nila, baka daw sila ang maunahan at sila pa yung mamatay. Sabi ko, sana po, hinuli nyo na lang. Kahit po habang buhay na kinulong niyo yung anak ko, mas matatanggap ko dahil may madadalaw ako Kung totoo man yung sinasabi niyo na nang hold up o anong inaakusan niyo sa anak ko, bakit niyo po siya pinatay? At saka ang tama po ng anak ko, hindi niyo po siya bubuhayin talaga. Nung natagpuan po yung bangkay ng anak ko, may baril siya sa kanang kamay niya. Pero may tama po yung anak ko sa kamay niya dito. Sabi ko, right-handed dyan, paano siya din siya may tama? Tapos nung nakausap nila ako, pagkatapos ng araw na yun, dinilit nila lahat yung post nila sa FB. Pero nakuha ko na yun kasi naisip nila na talaga yung nabaril nila ay ibang tao. Na parang ganun na lang nangyari, na nawala yung anak ko na ganun kadali. Nabiktima siya ng war on drugs, na wala kaming kalaban-laban. Una, natatakot talaga ako. Dahil alam na alam ko, mga pulis ang pumatay sa anak ko. Nung habang nilalakad ko, kinukuha ko yung medical legal niya, nakita ko sa picture ng anak ko, may bakat yung dalawang kamay niya ng posas. Kaya tinanong ko dun sa doktora na nag-autopsy, paano po nila sasabihin ng laban niyang anak ko? May posas po siya. Ibig sabihin po, naiposas po siya bago siya namatay. Bakit po inaakasuhan nilang ng laban? Kaya napakahirap na isipin yung anak ko na wala dahil nabiktima lang siya ng war on drugs na kung tutuusin, hindi naman nagda-drugs yung anak ko, pero namatay siya. At saka, tinatanong ko din noon, napapanood ko sa TV, pag may nababalita na napatay dahil ha-addict, pusher, masakit din sa loob dahil may buhay yun eh. Hindi naman dapat na patayin sila ng ganun-ganun na lang. At hindi ko din pumasok sa isip ko na yung anak ko magiging biktima na hindi naman addict. Nung naging biktima yung anak ko, naisip ko talaga na hindi lahat ng binabalita sa TV na addict ay addict. Hindi lahat ng napapatay ay gumagamit o pusher. Yung tinataniman sila na wala kang kalaban-laban. Napakahirap. Takot ako dahil pulis. Pero sabi ko kung hindi ako magsasalita, kung hindi ako tatayo sa ganito, ngayon first time ko lang magsalita, natatakot ako. Pero mas nakakatakot kung manahimik ako eh. Dahil mas marami pa na susunod. Malamang may isa pa akong anak na maging biktima rin. Sabi ko nga maraming pumipigil sa akin. Huwag na daw ako sumama dito. Manahimik na lang ako. Kasi patay na daw yung anak ko. Sabi ko, hindi na mababalik yung buhay ng anak ko. Pero gusto ko matigil na to, na para hindi na maramdaman ng ibang nanay kung ano yung nararamdaman ko. Kasi mahirap ipaliwanag, masakit. Umiiyak pa rin kami sa kabila ng paglaban namin. At nagpapasalamat kami sa mga katulad nyo na sumusuporta sa amin, na alam naman namin na nandyan lang kayo. Yung hirap, yung nangyayari sa ating gobyerno, namulat ako na ganito. Dati simpleng nanay lang ako sa bahay, kung ano lang yung trabaho, yun lang ang ginagawa ko. Sa gobyerno na nakikita, pag may napapanood ako sa TV, akala ko ganun, totoo lahat ng nakikita ko sa TV. Hindi ko isipin na maraming nang lumalabas sa TV na hindi totoo, na katulad yung anak ko, nabalita siya na ganun. Sabi ko nga, pinatay nyo na yung anak ko, pinasama nyo pa yung imahe ng anak ko bago mamatay. Pero sa lugar namin, kilalang-kilala yung anak ko. Doon nga ako na iiyak na ang dami nagmahal sa kanya. Lahat ng mga kaibigan niya, nagulat ako, yung mga nanay ng kaibigan niya, nagsasabi na bakit si Chris, sabing ganun. Napakabait na bata. Itong anak ko, bunso ko to eh. Mabait siya, simple lang. Nagtatrabaho siya sa fast food chain na dahil nga contractual lang, every 5 months, nawawalan siya ng trabaho, maghihintay ulit para makapagtrabaho, manghihiram ng pera, panlakad sa mga requirements. Nung una, akala ko, normal lang yung ganun eh. Pero ngayon, naiisip ko nga, dahil sa pagsama ko sa mga salita na ganito, sa mga rally, naiisip ko yung gobyerno, dahil nga, may contractual session, kung hindi natitigil yung anak ko sa trabaho, hindi siya masasama dun sa mga barkada niya na pumasyal dun sa Bulacan, busy siya magtrabaho. Lahat na ugnay-ugnay ko ang nangyari sa anak ko, yung dala ng kahirapan. Biktima kami, biktima yung mahihirap. Sabi ko nga, maraming gumagamit, napapanood ko sa TV yung mga nahuli. Nagugulat na lang ako, yung mga artista nahuli, paglabas, may pelikula na, may teleserye na. Pero ang lalaking drugs na nahuli sa kanila. Pero yung mga may hirap, na siguro yung iba gumagamit lang, pinapatay nila, yung iba nga hindi adik, tataniman pa nila. Kaya ako, 10 ng mga nanay ng Rise Up, nananawagan sa mga artists na alamin kung ano yung mga pinagdadaanan namin na hirap at saka yung nararamdaman namin na hanggang ngayon, oo, matapang na kaming humarap dito sa inyo, magsalita. Pero yung totoo, yung agam-agam at saka yung dalahin namin sa dibdib, hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin nawawala. Kasi nakakatakot dahil hanggang nandyan si Duterte, alam kong hindi pa rin ito matitigil. Yung kaming mahirap nga, may attorney, di ba, kung sinong mga napapatay nila na mas mataas sa amin. Ganun-ganon nilang napapatay. Paano pa kami lalong mahirap lang na hindi nga namin kaya kumuha ng abogado para magdemanda. Kaya nananawagan po kami sa inyo, sa lahat sa inyo na pagpatuloy ang paglaban, yung pakikibaka. Kanina yung may nagsalita dito. Naiyak ako sa kanya kasi hindi niya nararanasan. Totoo, hindi niya. Yung marami sa inyo, hindi niyo naman naranasan yung nangyari sa amin. Pero nandito kayo at nakikiisa sa paglaban namin. Maraming pong salamat.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Marisa.
Salamat, Marisa. Tandaan mo lang na kami mga artista, papatuloy ng laban para sa iyo.
Nandito kami.
At sa lahat ng iba pang biktima ng EJK.
Nakakagalit talaga pag naririnig ng mga ganyang istorya.
Kasama mo kami, Marisa. So, ngayon sa puntong ito, malapit na pong magtapos ang ating programa.
Bago ko introduce yung huling magsasalita, inuulit ko, huwag natin kalimutan yung pag-sign sa ating manifesto wall at saka yung may sheet din na kailangan lagdaan din. Okay. Ayun, yung huli nating tagapagsalita, siya yung magsasalita patungkol dun sa Artists Manifesto of Unity. May we now call on Mr. Ronnie Lazaro, co-founder of Dakila.
Wala na akong masabi pa. Ito na lang babasahin ko. We live in dangerous times. Witnessing relentless efforts on life, livelihood and lifestyle. We Filipino artists and cultural workers strongly affirm the human rights of all. The fulcrum upon which hinges the possibility of prosperous, humane, and fair society that we all aspire to have. Today, we are hurtling towards another dark era. We live under threat of more surveillance, repression, arrests, killings, and enforced disappearances. We are horrified by the terror that the brutal drug campaign sows on impoverished communities and how it has resulted in massive, horrific loss of human lives. We lament the state of our nation where the marginalized sector suffer most from grave abuses, if not massacres. We are angered by the orchestrated attacks on silent dissent, persisting socioeconomic inequalities, the disregard of the rule of law, the culture of misogyny and violence perpetrated, and the legitimation of tyranny that has historically wounded our nation. As artists and citizens, we refuse to stay silent in the face of wrongdoings. We stand by the principle of human rights and dignity for all. Human rights must be protected, reclaimed, and upheld to give voice to the millions whose freedoms are denied. We express our commitment to action. We affirm the need for creative practice that persists through the rhetoric of those in power and reflects the true coordination of society. We invoke the power of art to unite a nation divided and to empower the people to reclaim rights, narratives, and dignity in the face of inhumanity, iniquity, and injustice. We call on our colleagues in the arts and culture community to defend our rights to freedom of speech and expression as we stand for justice and the people's welfare. We urge other sectors of the rest of the Filipino people to do the same. Please. We stand in solidarity and gather our strength against the attacks and the threat to our humanity as Filipino people. Please stand up. We, artists and cultural workers, we are citizens of this nation. We pledge to make art our weapon to uphold truth, freedom, human rights, and dignity for all at all times. Maraming salamat po.
Mabuhay ka, Mr. Ronnie Lazaro.
Yes, ang gusto nating baguhin ay dapat nating banggain. All of you who are here tonight.
We hope that our collaborations do not end in this gathering, but rather let this be a spark towards more activities of artists to protect, uphold, and defend human rights.
So please do share this via our social media sites and simply use the hashtags #Artists for Human Rights and #HRFestPhilippines and #StopTheAttacks.
As we always say, art may not change the world, but it can change the way we view the world. For true revolution begins in the imagination.
So, tinatawagan po namin para mag-set up, para patuloy po ang rakrakan natin ngayong gabi. Andiyan ba sila?
Huwag tayo alis.
Palakpakan